Tier 1. Scientology. Scientology is one of those rabbit holes that gets weirder the deeper you fall. On the surface, it looks like just another religion with fancy buildings, celebrity endorsements, and even something that kinda resembles sermons. But the moment you start peeling back the layers, you realize it's a sci-fi thriller, courtroom drama, and con job all wrapped in one. Or at least that's what some people say. It all started with L. Ron Hubbard, a science fiction writer who woke up one day and said, "Therapy is too slow, so I'll invent my own version of it." Okay, so maybe that's not exactly what he said, but you get the point. His first idea, Dianetics, was pitched as a type of self-help therapy. But when that flopped and his organization went bankrupt, he decided to try a different approach. And that's how Scientology was born. Same ideas, new tax benefits. At the heart of Scientology is auditing, where you pay to spill your deepest traumas into a machine, while an auditor uses a machine called an e-meter to measure emotional responses. It doesn't sound so bad until you realize each session costs money, and getting clear is just the beginning. Next comes the operating Thetan levels, where followers hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars just to find out the religion's core belief. People who practice Scientology believe that an alien warlord named Xenu dumped billions of souls into volcanoes some 75 million years ago, and blew them up with nukes. Those traumatized alien souls, known as body Thetans, were somehow now causing people mental and spiritual harm. And those body Thetans, according to Hubbard, they're clinging to you right now. They're why you're depressed, anxious, or broke. Not your life decisions. Alien ghosts, obviously. But it's not just the alien terrorist behavior that's creepy. The organization has been accused of everything from forced abortions to spying on governments. In the 70s, they infiltrated the US government, broke into offices, stole documents, and got caught. Several members went to prison. Even L. Ron himself was convicted of fraud in France, but the church kept going, fighting legal battles around the world to be recognized as a legit religion. Some countries, like the US and Australia, gave in. Others, like Germany and France, straight up labeled it a dangerous cult. So, is Scientology a religion, a business, or a sci-fi scam? I'll let you be the judge of that. Santa Muerte cults. If you walk through certain neighborhoods in Mexico City, you might catch a glimpse of a glass case stuffed with candles, tequila, cigarettes, and candy. Inside, there's a skeletal figure draped in a red, black, or golden robe. That's Santa Muerte, the personification of death, otherwise called the Bony Lady. And that makeshift altar you just encountered is just one of thousands. The Bony Lady isn't your usual saint. She doesn't come from the Bible, and the Catholic Church wants nothing to do with her. Worshipping Santa Muerte comes across as a bit dark, so it's more a personal religion rather than a public one. Most rituals happen in cramped apartments, behind convenience stores, or in the back rooms of tattoo parlors. Her altars are decorated like shrines to a rock star, with cigarettes for cleansing, apples to sweeten her mood or something like that, and full bottles of mezcal as tribute. There's no rulebook for this one, just a mix of folk magic, Catholic prayers, and indigenous death rites. It's common to see followers kneeling in front of her image, whispering thanks or asking for help, and the favors they typically ask for aren't small. They beg her to cure cancer, protect them from corrupt cops, reunite them with lost lovers, or guard them during dangerous jobs, especially those that happen after dark. Oh yeah, she's also known as the Lady of the Night, and is believed to look after people living close to death, like people in adult work, drug dealers, taxi drivers, gang members, and even soldiers. Each color of her candle her followers light has a meaning. They go with red if they want passion, gold if they need money, white for peace, and of course, black for protection or revenge. Some go all in with 7-color candles for extra power. If you ever stumble upon a statue of the Bony Lady, she's likely to be dressed like a bride, a nun, or sometimes even the Virgin of Guadalupe, though the last one tends to ruffle a lot of very Catholic feathers. Some believers tuck dollar bills into her gown. Others offer up their most personal items like wedding rings, locks of hair, and handwritten wishes sealed with wax, depending on what they want. They say she looks after the outcasts, overlooked, the desperate, and the damned, and all she asks for in return is faith and a candle. Rajneesh movement. The Rajneesh movement looked like a peaceful yoga retreat on the outside, complete with followers in flowing orange robes, meditating, chanting, and preaching the wonders of free love. But under the incense and mantras was a power-hungry machine run by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, later known as Osho, a man who, depending on whom you asked, was either an enlightened guru or a criminal mastermind. Some people say he wasn't exactly the mastermind, but you get the point. Rajneesh mixed Eastern spirituality with Western-style group therapy, and a heavy dose of adult liberation. He called marriage a scam, families a disease, and organized religion a con. Basically, if it was traditional, he was against it. Meanwhile, he was amassing wealth, power, and a fleet of Rolls Royces. In the 1980s, Rajneesh and his followers moved to a massive ranch in Oregon and built their own city called Rajneeshpuram. They didn't just want to hang out in the desert. They wanted to take over local politics. When charming the locals didn't work, they tried bioterrorism. In 1984, they launched the first ever bioterror attack on US soil. They laced salad bars in the Dales with salmonella in an attempt to sway a county election. Over 750 people got violently sick, all for a few more county commissioner positions. At the center of the madness was Ma Anand Sheela, Rajneesh's fiery and ruthless right hand. She ran Rajneeshpuram like her personal fiefdom, ordering wiretaps, planning assassinations, and casually poisoning folks like she was stirring sugar into tea. Eventually, the whole thing imploded. Sheela was arrested and sent to prison. Rajneesh, ever the escape artist, cut a deal and got deported, but he couldn't find a place to land. No, seriously, over 20 countries told him to take his enlightenment elsewhere. He eventually ended up back in India, where he was somehow welcomed like a misunderstood rock star and resumed his teachings. Today, the Rajneesh brand lives on as a sanitized spiritual retreat, complete with Osho-themed books, meditation, and merch. All that's left of Rajneeshpuram are abandoned buildings, federal files, and the lingering smell of tainted salad bars. People's Temple, Jonestown. Once upon a time, in mid-century America, a man named Jim Jones had a dream. Not the kind of dream where everyone's equal and happy. Well, actually, kind of, but also not really. Jim started off preaching about racial harmony, equality, and helping the poor. He even opened a soup kitchen, offered free clothes, and helped with rent. But let's just say Jim's version of utopia came with a lot of strings. You see, Jim wasn't your regular preacher. He was a self-proclaimed Marxist who figured the best way to spread communism in Cold War America was to sneak it in through the back door, disguised in a holy robe. So he started the People's Temple in Indianapolis and began pulling off fake faith healings. He convinced people their cancer was cured by pulling bloody tumors out of them mid-sermon. Spoiler, it was chicken liver from the butcher. Since he was offering free healing, it's no surprise that Jim's flock grew fast. Plus, he promised a safe haven for Black Americans fleeing segregation. On the surface, it sounds like a really good deal, but behind the scenes, Jim wasn't preaching anymore. He was tightening the screws. He asked members of his congregation to sever ties with their families, sign over their possessions, and start calling the church their real home. Eventually, Jim moved his flock to California, then fled to the jungles of Guyana. South America convinced, or maybe just convincing everyone else, that nuclear war was right around the corner. In the jungle, far away from anyone who didn't buy into his BS, he built a paradise called Jonestown, where members worked like slaves under the scorching sun in a mosquito-infested commune. Meanwhile, he got to live like a dictator, surrounded by armed guards and loudspeakers that blasted his sermons. It was paradise for him, at least. In 1978, it all fell apart. A U.S. representative came to investigate and was murdered alongside some members of his team while trying to leave. Hours later, 900 people, men, women, and children, were made to drink cyanide-laced Flavor Aid in what Jones called revolutionary suicide. Some were coerced into drinking it, others did so willingly, and a small group were injected with the mixture. This incident went on to become the largest deliberate loss of American civilian life until 9/11. Children of God, the Family International. The Family International, formerly known as the Children of God, started in 1968 as a group of born-again hippies in California, and they were led by a guy named David Brandt Berg. It started with peace, love, Jesus, and casual apocalyptic warnings. You know, standard hippie starter kit. But underneath all the talk about free love and salvation, things were a lot darker. At its peak, the group was global. They had communes all over the world, and some surprisingly high-profile members like Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan, who were both raised as members. So how exactly did they operate? Well, the family had what can only be described as the most cursed missionary strategy ever. Flirty, fishing female members were encouraged to, let's say, romantically convert potential followers, because apparently salvation worked better when it came with a side of seduction. And yes, that was the actual pitch. The practice kicked off in the 1970s and, as you might imagine, caused a lot of backlash. The group claimed flirty fishing was just another tool to win souls for Jesus. But for many of the people involved, especially the women who were pressured into it, it was straight up exploitation. They also racked up disturbing allegations, especially involving how children were treated. And those accusations stuck with the group long after Berg became a footnote in cult history. On top of that, David Berg wasn't exactly what you would call a humble leader. He called himself Moses and the last end-time prophet, and would send out his teachings in bizarre, rant-filled Mo letters. These letters covered everything from the apocalypse to very questionable views on sexuality. They also kept his followers firmly under his control. Over the years, former members have come forward with disturbing allegations, especially about how children were treated. These days, the Family International is still around, but they've rebranded as a modern spiritual movement. Now, they talk a lot about spiritual warfare and claim to have these mysterious special keys to heaven, whatever that's supposed to mean. Heaven's Gate. The members of this group call themselves the Heaven's Gateway Team, like they were cast members of Star Trek on a mission to the stars. But instead of a spaceship, it was a rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe. And instead of beaming up into space, they took a tragic and bizarre path to what they believe was ascension to the next level. 39 people, matching tracksuits, brand new Nikes, and a plastic bag over each head. We will get to that in a bit. Let's take it from the top. The group was started in 1970s by Marshall Applewhite, a man with preacher DNA and a love for sci-fi, and Bonnie Nettles, a nurse who believed aliens had plans for humanity. Together, they crisscrossed the US preaching they were biblical two witnesses, but with aliens and fax machines. Earth, to them, was a corrupted classroom, and graduation meant death. The bodies would be left behind, and the souls would hitch a ride on a spaceship hiding behind Comet Halley-Bopp. By the 90s, the group had gone digital. Members of Heaven's Gate had a website, wore uniforms, and ran a web design business called Higher Source. They lived like monks. No drugs, no personal identity, and definitely none of the activities that usually require candles and a locked door. In March 1997, when the comet got close enough, they made their final exit. They videotaped their goodbyes, mixed barbiturates into applesauce and pudding, drank vodka, and pulled plastic bags over their heads. Those who were first were tucked in with purple shrouds over their faces, and $5.75 in their pockets for some afterlife toll. Oh, and they were dressed in uniform. Black sweatpants, black shirts, and Nike Decade sneakers. They called it Unity. Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians were an apocalyptic Christian cult that caused one of the deadliest religious standoffs in American history. It all started with Victor Hotef, a Bulgarian immigrant who thought the Seventh-day Adventist Church needed some fixing. His followers, known as Davidians, built a commune in Texas called Mount Carmel, and after his death, things only got weirder. In the late 1950s, a man named Benjamin Roden popped up claiming he had a newer message from God and started calling himself the Branch. His followers became the Branch Davidians, and they believed Jesus had entered a new phase in heaven and that the world was on the brink of ending. After Roden died, leadership bounced between his wife Lois and their son George until a charismatic, guitar-strumming preacher named Vernon Howell came into the picture. He later renamed himself David Koresh because he claimed he had ties to both King David and Cyrus the Great. Koresh took over Mount Carmel the way any self-proclaimed messiah would, by getting into a shootout with the previous leader. Under his rule, things spiraled. Scripture got twisted. Child brides became part of the divine plan, and everyone started prepping for an apocalyptic showdown. Koresh saw himself as the Lamb of God from the Book of Revelation, except instead of peace, he brought stockpiles of guns. By 1993, the US government had had enough. ATF agents launched what was supposed to be a quick raid, but it turned into a 51-day siege. It all ended in flames, literally. FBI tanks and tear gas closed in, and a massive fire engulfed the compound. 76 people died in the blaze, including women and children. To this day, no one agrees on who started the fire. Some say it was Koresh's followers, while others believe the government was responsible. Tier 2. Aum Shinrikyo. Aleph. Aum Shinrikyo started off like your typical New Age spiritual group with meditation, yoga, and just a little doomsday talk on the side. Okay, so maybe that's not how spiritual groups are supposed to be. The group was founded in 1984 by Shoko Asahara, a partially blind man with a talent for recruiting and a flair for dramatic titles, but it didn't become a religion until 1987. Asahara claimed to be Christ, Buddha, and told everyone he was destined to survive an oncoming nuclear apocalypse. Naturally, this drew in a mix of the spiritually curious and highly educated, including doctors, scientists, and university students. At its peak, Aum Shinrikyo had an estimated 40,000 followers, and just like that, what began in a one-room yoga studio in Tokyo quickly morphed into something far more dangerous. By the time authorities started paying attention, Aum had amassed weapons, built secret labs, and developed chemical agents all under the guise of spiritual enlightenment. Criticism wasn't exactly welcome with this crowd. So, lawyers, journalists, and rival religious leaders who criticized the group either disappeared or ended up dead. Inside the cult, members were subjected to harsh training methods, which included sleep deprivation, drugging, and physical abuse. In 1994, tested sarin gas on the town of Matsumoto, killing 8 people and injuring hundreds. A year later, they carried out their most infamous act, the 1995 Tokyo subway attack. During rush hour, members released sarin gas across multiple subway lines, killing 13 people and injuring more than 6,000. The attack was intended to distract police from raiding the group's compounds, though it ended up doing the exact opposite. When authorities did move in, they uncovered a disturbing stockpile: weapons, chemicals, and even a Russian military helicopter. Asahara and several top members were arrested, tried, and eventually executed for their roles in the attacks. The group later broke into smaller factions and rebranded itself as Aleph and Hikari no Wa. But Japanese authorities weren't convinced by the makeover. To make sure history doesn't repeat itself, they put the 2 successor groups under surveillance. They are still under surveillance as we speak. Unification Church. The Unification Church was a global, holy matchmaking empire led by a man who believed he was the Messiah, which of course is nothing new. Sun Myung Moon, the founder, claimed that Jesus appeared to him when he was a teenager and personally passed him the baton to finish the job he couldn't, because, crucifixion. Moon accepted the task and set out to purify humanity by creating the perfect, sinless family. And just how do you build a world free from sin? Through really big weddings, apparently. The blessing ceremonies, as they're called, became the church's most infamous tradition. Thousands of couples, many of whom had never met before, were matched by Moon himself and married in synchronized stadium weddings. They believed this wiped out Satan's bloodline and restored their place in God's family tree. The doctrine is based on a very unique retelling of Genesis, where Eve didn't eat a literal forbidden fruit. She got it on with Satan instead. So yeah, in their worldview, everyone was literally born from the devil's hookup, and only Moon could fix it with divine matchmaking. As the movement grew, so did its reach and its controversy. The church built a multi-billion-dollar empire by dabbling in everything from newspapers to schools. Moon's grip was tight. His followers often handed over their savings, worked for free, and cut off family ties. Critics and former members described it as financial and psychological exploitation wrapped in devotion. Moon even tried to reshape global politics by using his influence to support anti-communist causes and push for Korean reunification, with himself as a kind of spiritual monarch, of course. When Moon died in 2012, his empire began to collapse. They faced financial woes, family feuds, and there was also a pesky dissolution order in Japan. One son, Hyung-jin, went rogue and started Rod of Iron Ministries, which some have described as a spin-off where AR-15 rifles are considered sacred objects. Members of this new establishment openly supported political violence, but that is a whole other story. Order of the Solar Temple. In 1984, Joseph de Mombro, a French jeweler with a flair for fraud, and Luc Juret, a Belgian homeopath with a passion for spiritual TED Talks, came together and founded the Order of the Solar Temple. The OTS promised members enlightenment, cosmic ascension, and the occasional matching robe. These guys weren't just cosplaying cult members, though. They really believed they were reviving the Knights Templar and preparing humanity for a cosmic apocalypse. Members of the order were obsessed with the star Sirius because they believed that the Ascended Masters, aka godlike beings, lived on Sirius and had plans for Earth's chosen few. The OTS believed Earth was on a ticking clock. The age of Aquarius was coming, and only those who embraced ritual robes, candlelit ceremonies, and a hierarchy full of people with weird titles would survive the cosmic cleanse. It didn't take too long for things to get out of hand. Soon, ex-members were speaking up about their experiences, and the police began an investigation into the cult. However, de Mombro and Juret didn't plan to make a quiet exit. In fact, they were going for the opposite. In 1994, the two arranged a ceremony they called a transit to Sirius. Members were drugged, shot, and burned in a coordinated mass death across Switzerland and Canada. A whole family was murdered because they tried to leave when de Mombro decided that their newborn was the Antichrist. After the 1994 ceremony, another wave of mass deaths followed in 1995 and 1997 in different locations. In total, 74 people died, including the founders. Many were found arranged in ceremonial circles, as if waiting to beam up to Sirius. With DeMambro and Jarrett dead, the group eventually collapsed. And to this day, no one agrees on what to call the OTS. UFO religion? Magical cult? Secret society? Suicide sect? Whatever the case, they existed, and people believed in them, which is a scary thing in and of itself. Church of Euthanasia. In the early 90s, while most people were arguing over grunge music or whether the internet would catch on, a software developer slash artist named Chris Korda decided that the real problem was humanity itself. So of course, she decided to start a church. Korda and another man named Robert Kimberg founded the Church of Euthanasia in Boston. Their mission was, save the planet, yourself. No, really, that's not a joke. It was their actual slogan. The Church of Euthanasia wasn't your average doomsday cult. There were no robes and no secret bunkers. Instead, it was a fully legal, legally incorporated nonprofit, pushing the wildest sermon you've ever heard. The earth is dying and humans are the disease. Their one commandment was, thou shalt not procreate. And if that sounds extreme, wait till you hear their 4 pillars. Self-deleting, which was optional but encouraged. Abortion, which may be required. Cannibalism, but only if the meat's already dead. And sodomy, because they thought it was the perfect way to have non-baby making sex. The church shouted their message through megaphones, staged street performances, crashed pro-life rallies, and once slapped the internet in the face with a video titled, I Like to Watch. The video was a mix of hardcore corn with 9/11 footage, electronic beats, and lyrics like, my steel melted and my tower's coming down. Yes, you heard that right. People were outraged, but Chris and Korda didn't care. At one point, their website featured a full self-deleting instruction manual until someone actually used it and died. That incident led to legal consequences and a quick takedown. But despite the controversy, or maybe because of it, the church became a spectacle of absurdity, art, and protest. Today, the Church of Euthanasia is mostly inactive, but the site still exists. Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. In 1989, in the hills of southwestern Uganda, a woman named Credonia Murinde came out to say that the Virgin Mary had given her a message. The apocalypse was coming. Not a metaphorical one, a full-blown fire and brimstone end of days. And a former Catholic politician named Joseph Kibwatire believed her. Together, they founded what might be the most terrifying club in history, the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. The goal was to follow the 10 Commandments to the letter, which doesn't sound too bad until you see how far they took it. Talking was discouraged in case someone accidentally broke the 9th commandment about lying, and on some days, they only communicated using sign language. Soap was banned, adult play was a sin, and they were allowed only 1 meal a day. But the real nightmare started when they picked a date for the end of the world, December 31, 1999. Members sold everything, fasted, confessed, and waited for the world to end. But the new year came and went, and the only thing that crashed was their credibility. So the leaders doubled down and a new date was set, March 17, 2000. This time, they threw a goodbye party, roasted bulls and crates of Coca-Cola. And then, the church was set on fire with over 500 people trapped inside and the doors nailed shut. Everyone burned alive. At first, it looked like mass suicide. But when police started digging, they found more bodies in pits, latrines, and beneath floors at other cult properties. The victims had been poisoned and or stabbed, and some of them had been dead for weeks. In total, more than 700 people died. When the time came for them to pay for their crimes, the leaders of the movement vanished. No arrests were made. 12 tribes. Before the raid, before the lawsuits, before the scandals broke open, these guys actually began as a coffee shop called The Lighthouse. It was run out of the living room of a man named Gene Springs in the early 70s, Chattanooga, Tennessee. The 12 tribes started with a bunch of Jesus-loving teens who wanted something more radical than Sunday sermons. So they started living together, working together, praying together. Then came their own church, their own restaurants, and pretty much their own world. The problem is that world got dark pretty fast. The 12 tribes believed they were restoring the true ancient faith. They wanted to rebuild the lost tribes of Israel, live like the early Christians, and wait for the end times. Everyone got a new Hebrew name. The leader became Yannick, and what he said went. Women submitted, men led, and children suffered. Former members say beatings were a common ritual. Infants were lashed with balloon sticks, while teenagers were whipped bloody. One ex-member said if a child messed up twice, they were beaten twice. Kids were homeschooled, apprenticed by age 13, and worked long hours in candlelit soap factories. Investigators caught 14-year-olds labeling products for Estee Lauder, pushing wheelbarrows and climbing ladders. The tribe said it was a family business. law said it was child labor. Their theology didn't help their case. They taught that Jews killed Christ, black people were cursed by God, and that slavery was a marvelous opportunity. And by the way, they weren't hiding any of their beliefs. They printed it, preached it, and spoke about it openly. In 1984, Vermont police finally tried to shut it all down. They stormed their Island Pond commune in a massive raid and began snatching kids from beds. But it backfired. A judge called the whole thing unconstitutional, and so the children went back and the mistreatment continued. Spriggs died in 2021, but the 12 tribes live on in quiet communes across the world. The Process Church of the Final Judgment. The Process Church of the Final Judgment was basically Scientology and Satanism having a weird baby in the 1960s. A baby that liked to wear black capes and worship both Jesus and Lucifer. The cult was so messy that at one point there were suspicions that it was linked to Charles Manson. Mary Ann McLean and Robert Moore, two ex-Scientologists who seemed to thrive off drama and psychological control, woke up one day and quit Scientology. They then created their own spin-off cult with a pantheon where Christ, Satan, Lucifer, and Jehovah were all seen as parts of the same divine whole. The idea was to reconcile opposites like creation and destruction, good and evil, blah blah blah, and that somehow brings spiritual wholeness. The group first moved into a London commune, then fled to Mexico for a spiritual retreat in a jungle village called Chitul. There, a hurricane nearly flattened them. After it was over, the disaster was made into a myth. Those who survived the storm became the cult's inner circle, and everyone else was kind of a spiritual peasant. By the late 60s, they'd set up shop in America, particularly New Orleans, San Francisco, and even a place called Satan's Cavern in London. But their odd theology soon started to raise eyebrows. Then came the Manson murders. Although there was no solid evidence of a link, Manson did drop spooky lines like "Moore and I are one and the same." This statement raised more than a few eyebrows at the idea because Moore happened to be the name of the church's founder. Just like that, Manson's words turned the Process Church into tabloid food. The heat forced them to rebrand. The cloaks went into the closet. The devil talk got quiet. And eventually, the whole group morphed into an animal rescue charity in Utah. I bet you didn't see that one coming. Tier 3. Temple of Set. Michael Aquino used to be Anton LaVey's right-hand man at the Church of Satan. He even edited their newsletter. But eventually, he decided LaVey's whole vibe was too theatrical and not mystical enough. So, naturally, he performed a ritual to summon Satan, who showed up and actually said, "Actually, I go by Set now, the ancient Egyptian god of chaos." And with that, the Temple of Set was born. Unlike their satanic predecessors, Setians don't see themselves as devil worshippers. In fact, they prefer not to be called Satanists at all. They view Set as a symbol of individuality, willpower, and transformation. He's regarded as a deity who gave humanity the black flame, aka the spark of consciousness that allows for reasoning and magical potential. Setians don't worship Set. They aim to emulate him. Their end goal is to self-deification. They want to become gods in their own right. The temple is structured around degrees of progression. Members advance based on personal development, magical achievement, and their ability to guide others. It's a slow climb. Most don't get very far, but those who do help shape the organization. The temple is led by a high priest or priestess, appointed by a group called the Council of Nine. And here's the twist. Aquino wasn't just into robes and rituals. He was also a U.S. Army PSYOPs officer with access to actual intelligence tools, because apparently summoning chaos gods wasn't enough. He even founded a Setian order in Wewelsburg Castle, a site that had previously been used by the SS during World War II. These days, the Temple of Set is still active, though it operates mostly quietly and with far less public attention than in its early years. It continues to operate in the US, Europe, and Australia, spreading chaos, but very academically. Obeah. Obeah doesn't just live in the shadows, it was born there, raised in rebellion and built to survive when nothing else could. We're going to need a time machine for this one. It is the 1700s and the Caribbean is a pressure cooker of colonial greed, stolen people, and simmering rebellion. In the middle of all this, enslaved Africans brought with them fragments of their religions, their medicine, and their magic, all of which would eventually play a critical role in forming Obeah. Obeah was never a clean-cut system. It was more like a mashup. Part African tradition, part Christianity, part whatever works when you're desperate and surrounded by chaos. It wasn't just about belief. It was about surviving with the spirits on your side. Obeah doesn't have temples, choirs, or Sunday service. What it does have are people, Obeah men and Obeah women, sometimes even called scientists or professors, who know exactly how to bend the spirit world to do what needs doing. You want someone cursed? Done. You want a love spell? Or maybe a potion to give your enemy the stomach bug for a week? Obeah has a recipe for that. You want protection from a rival's evil eye or justice from a corrupt world? Yeah, that's available too. Or it could be, if you pay the right price. Now, here's where things get dark. The colonizers absolutely hated Obeah. Not just because it wasn't Christian, but because it freaked them out. Which makes sense considering it was used to poison slave masters, spark rebellions, and basically turn fear into power. So of course, they banned it and made laws against it, calling it fraud, superstition, and straight up evil. The thing about trying to ban something is that in most cases, it doesn't actually die. It just disappears into cracks, and that's exactly what happened. Obeah went underground, where it got even more secretive and slippery. And because of that, even today, a lot of Caribbean folks avoid saying the word Obeah out loud. They tell you it's risky and too close to the line between healing and harm. And yet, Obeah is still here, in Jamaica, Trinidad, Suriname, and even parts of Brooklyn and London. Sometimes it's just prayer and a candle. Other times, it's a bottle buried under your doorstep. I wouldn't touch that. Thuggy. Imagine this. You're a traveler in 18th century India, strolling through the dusty roads with a group of strangers who seem friendly. One of them makes jokes, offers you food, and maybe even prays beside you. You think, nice folks, but little do you know, you're being sized up like meat at a butcher's stall. When night falls, your new friend distracts you with small talk while someone creeps up behind you, slips a scarf around your neck, and tightens it in one quick, noiseless motion. No blood, no screams, just silence. You've just met the Thuggy. Thuggies weren't your average bandits. They formed a creepy, organized network, some say a cult, that operated across India for centuries, robbing and killing innocent people when the chance arose. Strangulation was their signature move, and it was often done with a noose or a scarf known as rumal. They preferred it because it kept things clean. There was no blood, less evidence, and some believed it pleased Kali, the Hindu goddess of transformation, time, and yeah, sometimes destruction. It didn't only kill for loot. They had rituals, hierarchies, and a secret lingo called Ramasi. Some were born into it, while others joined out of desperation. Sometimes they'd slip victims datura, a hallucinogenic plant tied to Shiva, to make them woozy and easier to handle. On rare occasions, they would adopt the children of their victims to keep things quiet and help them stay under the radar. However, in recent times, modern historians have started a theory that the whole Thuggy cult might have been partly cooked up by the British to justify colonial crackdowns. But whether it's the truth or propaganda, the legend of the Thuggy and their beliefs is still one of India's most haunting stories. The Church of Almighty God, Eastern Lightning. The Eastern Lightning, also known as the Church of Almighty God, is a religious movement that claims Jesus is on Earth. Apparently, Jesus came back, only this time, he's not a bearded man in sandals. He decided to switch things up and make an appearance as a Chinese woman with no public name, no Instagram, and no desire to communicate with the general public. This group popped up in 1991 and began spreading mimeographed revelations across Chinese house churches. The messages were from a woman believed to be the second coming of Christ. The group refuses to reveal her name, but she's widely believed to be Yang Shangbin, and her partner in prophecy is a former physics teacher named Zhao Wei Shan. Together, they grew from whispers in house churches to an international underground movement now headquartered in New York. Eastern Lightning didn't just stop at claiming Jesus is a woman. They also started saying that the Bible is flawed. The Chinese Communist Party is the great dragon from the Book of Revelation, and we're all living in the Age of Kingdom, where God, aka Yang, is trying to purge humanity of sin once and for all. The group publishes these divine updates in a book called The Word Appears in the Flesh. You can think of it as their sequel to the Bible. For a while it seemed harmless enough, but things got messy in China with members being accused of cutting off ears, breaking legs, and kidnapping leaders of rival Christian sects. The government banned the group in 1995 and started cracking down hard on them. Thousands of members have been arrested since then, and some have allegedly been tortured. Others reportedly died while in custody. So are they a persecuted church or a doomsday cult? That depends on who you ask. The Nuwaubian Nation. The Nuwaubian Nation is one of the strangest and most disturbing religious movements to emerge from the United States. And that's saying something. This movement was founded by Dwight York, a man who's changed religious identities more time than most people change their phone cases. He started in the 1960s as a black Muslim preacher, then rebranded into a pseudo-Egyptian prophet, then a UFO messiah, and somehow ended up as a convicted predator. By the 1990s, York had moved his operation to rural Georgia and built Tamare, a bizarre Egyptian-themed compound that looked a lot like a theme park designed by conspiracy theorists. Think pyramids, a golden sphinx, and armed guards patrolling the grounds. To outsiders, it was surreal. To insiders, It was sacred land and the center of their universe. The Nuwabian doctrine was a fever dream of conspiracy theories, sci-fi, ancient aliens, Egyptian gods, and York's own made-up theology. One moment you're reading about melanin magic, the next you're being told that aborted fetuses live in sewer systems, and the Illuminati is controlling time. It was part religion and part cosmic fanfiction, all wrapped around York's Messiah complex. But underneath all the alien talk and Egypt cosplay was something far more sinister. In 2002, federal agents raided Tamare and uncovered a mountain of evidence pointing to York's real activities: child mistreatment, money laundering, and illegal firearms. York was charged with over 100 counts, convicted, and sentenced to 135 years in federal prison. The pyramid scheme literally collapsed. Even with the compound gone and York behind bars, a few loyal followers still believe he's innocent. They claim it was all a setup by the government to silence a spiritual leader. Meanwhile, the rest of the world remembers the Nuwabians as a cult that went from cosmic enlightenment to full-blown criminal empire, with a leader who thought he was part pharaoh, part prophet, and someone above the law. The Church of the Lamb of God. If you thought sibling rivalry meant stealing toys or fighting over chores, let me introduce you to Ervil LeBaron, a self-proclaimed prophet, polygamist, and the man who turned family drama into a full-blown murder cult. Ervil started off in a fundamentalist Mormon offshoot, but when he clashed with his brother Joel over leadership and the right way to practice blood atonement, an old-school doctrine that basically says you've got to die for your sins, Ervil took the Old Testament route. In 1972, he had Joel assassinated by his own followers. Well, I guess that settles it. From there, Ervil went full dark mode. He formed the Church of the Lamb of God and built it around a divine hit list. If you left the church, you were marked for death. If you talked to law enforcement, death. Disagreed with doctrine, or even hesitated to give up property. Yep, you guessed it, death. Even his own daughter wasn't safe. Rebecca was 17 and pregnant when she threatened to talk to the police because she was angry about being separated from her infant son. And Ervil couldn't have that, so he had her killed and stuffed her body in a car trunk. Ervil wasn't just running a cult, he was running a spiritual mob, backed by dozens of wives and a growing flock of brainwashed teens who believed killing for the cause was righteous. He operated across the US and Mexico, carrying out a brutal campaign of intimidation, arson, and assassination. Even after his death in prison in 1981, his reign didn't stop. He left behind a manifesto called the Book of New Covenants, which doubled as a holy scripture and a mafia-style kill order. His sons Arturo and Heber picked up where he left off and continued the bloodshed. In 1988, they carried out a coordinated triple murder spree in under 10 minutes, killing ex-members, including an 8-year-old girl, just because their names were in Ervil's book. Eventually, the FBI caught up with the group, and 4 LeBaron siblings were arrested after one of their own turned them in. So yeah, if you're making a list of cults to avoid, maybe start with this one: the Apostles of Infinite Love. The Monastery of the Magnificat of the Mother of God sits deep in the woods of Quebec. It's home to a group called the Apostles of Infinite Love, or if you prefer the more poetic version, the Order of the Magnificat of the Mother of God. They started off with the kind of religious zeal you'd expect from a group convinced they'd found the one true path to salvation. But it didn't take long for things to spiral into the type of chaos that Netflix would pay millions for. It started with Michel Collin, a French priest who said Jesus personally made him a bishop, and that God the Father crowned him Pope Clement XV in a heavenly vision. So naturally, he did what any self-declared pope would do: set up shop and start running his own rogue version of the Catholic Church. And let's just say the real Vatican was not impressed. After getting excommunicated, Collin teamed up with Canadian Jean-Gaston Tremblay, who was also on his own spiritual side quest. Tremblay claimed divine anointing and later crowned himself Pope Gregory XVII. Oh, and just so you know, these two actually had coronations with robes and tiaras. The whole shebang. Their little empires attracted hardcore traditionalists who were freaked out by Vatican II and church modernizing. At first, there were only a few people, but the congregation grew fast. The members gave up all possessions, lived in strict obedience, and followed what they called the rule for the apostles of the latter times, which they claimed were inspired by visions linked to the Virgin Mary. By the 60s, the place was crawling with followers and secrets. Over time, serious allegations included assault, physical abuse, and cult-like control began to surface. Some of the victims were children. In 1999, the Quebec police stormed the place with 100 officers. Tremblay was never formally charged, but the group's image took a nosedive straight into scandal territory. And yet, they kept going. They've been called a cult, a rogue theocracy, and a doomsday sect, but somehow, they're still out there doing their thing. In 2012, a new pope was crowned. There was no conclave and no cardinals. Just another guy with a holy vision and probably a strong taste for velvet robes. But hey, when you run your own religion in the woods, you don't need Vatican approval. You just need a crown, title, and enough people willing to follow you. Tier 4. Prince Philip Movement. On a remote island in the South Pacific, deep in the jungles of Vanuatu, there's a group of villagers who genuinely believe that Prince Philip, the late husband of Queen Elizabeth II, was a godlike spiritual figure. They really thought he was the divine son of an ancient mountain spirit who had traveled far away, married a powerful white lady, and would one day return. This wasn't some modern prank or weird internet cult. It was, and still is, a real belief held by the Kastam people of southern Tanna Island, mostly in the villages of Yauhanan and Yakel. It all started in the mid-20th century, around the time colonial officials were marching around Vanuatu like they owned the place. The villagers noticed how much respect these powerful men gave to Queen Elizabeth, and they put two and two together. If the queen was that revered, her husband had to be someone very special. When they found out who the prince was, he just so happened to fit perfectly into an ancient prophecy about a spirit son who would marry a mighty woman overseas. That overseas place was apparently Britain, and the mountain spirit's son was, well, you know who. It all made sense. In 1974, when the royal couple visited the island, the locals didn't get to meet Philip up close, but just catching a glimpse of him was enough to seal the deal. Word got to the British officials that a remote tribe thought Prince Philip was a god. And instead of laughing it off, the prince actually played along. He sent them a signed portrait. They sent him a ceremonial pig killing club. He posed with it and sent back another photo. 3 photos in total were sent over the years, and they became sacred relics kept by the village chief like holy artifacts. They even sent a delegation of Tanna men to Britain to feature in a reality show called Meet the Natives, where they got to meet Philip in private. And when Prince Harry got married, the village celebrated with roasted pigs, tribal dancing, and Union Jacks flying like it was the Queen's birthday. When Prince Philip died in 2021, the grief was real. The tribe mourned deeply by flying their flag at half-mast and sending condolences to the Queen. Some say the torch has now passed to Charles, who visited them in 2018. So, yeah, a king might still be a god somewhere out there. Order of the Nine Angels, or ONA. Ah yes, the Order of the Nine Angels. Or as I like to call them, the cult version of what if Satanism had a midlife crisis and joined a hate group. On the surface, they look like your average satanic cult. Pentagrams, hooded robes, late night chanting under the moon, the whole package. But if you scratch even a little deeper, things get real dark real fast. So dark that even other Satanists doesn't want to sit with them. The ONA, because nobody has time to keep saying the full name while running in the opposite direction, showed up in the 1960s in the Welsh marches of Western England. They claim to have descended from ancient pagan mystics, but that's very unlikely, and their version of spiritual growth involves crimes, terrorism, and rituals that they call human sacrifice. The group was supposedly founded by a guy named Anton Long, who just might be a neo-Nazi named David Myatt. Myatt says it's not him, but let's be honest, the mustache twirls and manifesto energy are kind of a dead giveaway. The ONA is a chaotic cocktail of Satanism, neo-Nazism, accelerationism, and, for some reason, space colonization. They believe the world is under a big bad spell called the Magian influence, which is code for anything remotely Jewish, Christian, or sane. How? By encouraging members to infiltrate extremist groups, buddy up with both Nazis and jihadists, and just kind of let chaos sort itself out. It's like a terrorist internship with fringe benefits. Their big spiritual roadmap is called the Sevenfold Way. It includes wholesome activities like camping alone for months, lying perfectly still in a field at night, and trapping yourself in a cave for a full lunar cycle. ONA doesn't do official membership. You just start. Self-initiate. No applications, no registration process. Just congrats, you're in. And somehow, despite having no leader or structure, their books and ideologies have inspired real-world violence. Proof that you don't need to be organized to be dangerous. Just loud, and maybe criminally insane. Honohana Sanpogyo. Honohana Sanpogyo was Japan's infamous foot-reading cult, where your souls held the secrets to your soul and your wallet. The man behind this was Hogen Fukunaga, a silver-tongued, self-declared reincarnation of Jesus Christ and Buddha. He popped onto the spiritual scene in the 1980s, deep in debt but loaded with charisma. By 1987, he turned his epiphany into a full-blown religious corporation with headquarters in Mount Fuji. His specialty was foot readings. He'd stare at your toes, nod seriously, and then tell you were doomed unless you paid for a spiritual purification seminar that costs more than some cars. If that didn't scare you enough, his followers will helpfully explain how your family was cursed, your cancer would spread, or your mind would rot unless you coughed up even more money for scrolls, ornaments, and salvation. Housewives are Fukunaga's favorite target. One woman forked over millions in donations, while another was strong-armed into buying her way into a 5-day retreat to cure her curse. Behind the scenes, Fukunaga was living like a rock star. He dressed in Italian shoes and $5,000 suits, while his wife spent $7,000 a month on numerous shopping sprees. While members were bankrupting themselves for his lies, Fukunaga was spending millions or billions, depending on who you ask, playing groupie with world leaders and celebrities. He even got into a Clinton White House fundraising dinner via a $325,000 donation through Yogesh Gandhi, a distant relative of Mahatma Gandhi, but that's a whole nother story. Eventually, the authorities realized that Fukunaga's healing practice and religious sect was just garden variety fraud with a side of spiritual guilt tripping. Fukunaga was arrested, charged, and then slapped with a 12-year prison sentence. At least 9 of his top crimes were also convicted, because there's no way he could have pulled it off alone. Temple of Zeus. Joy of Satan Ministries. Try to imagine if ancient aliens, Satan, neo-Nazis, and chakra crystals decided to start a cult together. That's pretty much how you get the Temple of Zeus. Born in 2002 under the name of Joy of Satan Ministries, this group was the brainchild of Andrea Maxine Dietrich. Dietrich flipped the Satanist scene on its head by mixing theistic Satanism with pagan gods, UFO conspiracies, and blatant anti-Semitism. You probably didn't see that one coming. To the Temple of Zeus folks, Satan isn't just a creepy guy with horns. He's actually Enki, some wise alien god from Sumerian mythology who supposedly helped genetically engineer humans with his ancient alien squad. And here's where things get ugly. According to their totally messed up theology, the real bad guys are evil reptilian aliens who cooked up a rival human race by mixing their DNA with semi-animal humanoids. And yeah, that's how they claim Jewish people were created. It's not just weird, it's hateful. And sadly, it only goes downhill from there. The Temple of Zeus folks believe that after the reptilians took over Earth, they erased the memory of humanity's real alien gods and replaced them with Abrahamic religions. So in this world, Yahweh is the propaganda king, and Satan is the misunderstood hero who just wanted to give us knowledge, freedom, and a few tips for guided meditation. What really kicked off controversy was when it came out that the JOS high priestess, Dietrich, was married to a leader in an actual neo-Nazi group. That's kind of like finding out your local crystal healing store also hosts Klan rallies. It all blew up into a public hot mess, and JOS faced years of criticism for their white supremacist ties. But that didn't stop them from pushing demon-invoking meditations and third-eye exercises on angel fire sites that looked like relics from the Windows 95 era. Eventually, their original site was shut down and the cult rebranded itself as the Temple of Zeus. But underneath the new paint job, it's still the same stew of anti-Semitic mythology, space lingo, and occult rituals. If you ever wander into one of their forums, expect to find demon summoning guides, alien history classes, and a whole lot of talk about meditation laced with Nazi-era ideology. Realism. A man was walking through the French countryside in the 1970s, minding his business, when a spaceship landed in front of him and a little green man with almond-shaped eyes stepped out and said, "Hey, you're the chosen one." That's basically how realism was born. The man was Claude Vourlant, also known as Rael, and his new mission after his chat with this alien was to spread the gospel of the Elohim, a super advanced extraterrestrial species who, according to him, created all life on Earth using science and some serious biohacking. Now, the Elohim aren't gods. They're just really smart aliens who got mistaken for gods back in the day. You know, those guys in ancient stories, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad. Yeah, Rael says they are all hybrid messengers made by the Elohim to prepare humanity for the final prophet, which of course was him. After the Hiroshima bombing, Rael claims the Elohim went full red alert and decided humanity needed to grow up or blow up. So they gave Rael the job of leading us into a new age of science that would involve things like cloning and sensual meditation, whatever that means. The Raelians aren't just about weird alien propaganda. They're organized. Like, really organized. They have a 6-level hierarchy, daily meditations, and a sci-fi flavored vision of paradise. They even tried to build an alien embassy with a landing pad, but the project faced challenges. And then there's Clonade, the Raelian-backed company that claimed to have cloned a human baby named Eve in 2002. Well, what do you know? There's absolutely no proof. Oh, and if you think it ends there, it doesn't, because there's also the Order of Angels. This is a group of Raelian women handpicked to be spiritual and possibly literal lovers for the Elohim when they return. They're expected to perfect their bodies, minds, and seductive skills, all in service of alien diplomacy. While they say they're atheists who love science, critics still call them a religious cult. But hey, if you're into aliens with no clothes, eternal cloning, and a utopia built on sensual meditation, you might have found your tribe. Tier 5. Agori. Imagine if death metal became a religion, moved into a graveyard, and decided deodorant was a scam. That's basically the Agori, an extreme sect of Hinduism based in India, best known for doing everything your mom told you not to do. They worship Shiva, but not the peaceful, meditative version you see in yoga studios. No, they're all about Shiva in his most terrifying form, aka Bhairava, the Destroyer. Their end goal is to gain liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth, which isn't all bad until you hear about their methods. Well, let's just say their spiritual path comes with a side of corpses. The Agori believe that everything in the universe is divine. Life, death, trash, treasure, leftover mascara from your high school emo phase, doesn't matter. It's all sacred. To them, the path to spiritual freedom means rejecting all social norms. Not just rejecting them, torching them, dancing on the ashes, and maybe using those ashes as body paint. We'll get to that in a bit. The Agori live in cremation grounds, smear ash from human corpses on their skin, and meditate surrounded by skulls. And if you think that's intense, it gets worse. They also eat corpses. Not symbolically, not metaphorically. Occasionally, literally, as part of ritual practice. Okay, it's more like a rare ritual, but it does happen, and they're not doing it to freak people out though. Mission accomplished. They truly believe that by confronting the most feared and disgusting parts of existence like death, decay, and rot, they can transcend the illusion of duality. To put it simply, if everyone else runs from it, the Agori run toward it, barefooted and smiling. One of their most popular rituals is meditating on a corpse at midnight, while calling on a fierce goddess, surrounded by the stench of burning flesh as a way to merge with the divine. Hey, I did tell you things would get a lot weirder. Now, where was I? The Agori actually believe that all their terrifying rituals come with benefits. After they go through, well, all that, they're said to gain powers like healing, clairvoyance, or just being completely unfazed by anything ever again. Historically, they descend from the Kapalika set, an older, equally wild group known for wearing human bones and carrying out rituals that may or may not have involved human sacrifices and flesh eating. The Agori took that torch, dipped it in holy booze, and kept the tradition alive. Oh, and according to legend, their founder, Baba Kinaram, was blessed by a god who literally offered him flesh as holy food. Honestly, that pretty much sums up the Agori's belief system. If it terrifies you, it's probably sacred. The Brethren, garbage eaters. They go by the Brethren, but they don't really go by anything. They have no church, no address, and no real name. Just a ragtag crew in tunics and sandals, drifting across America, started in the early 1970s, during the tail end of the Jesus movement. A guy named Jim Roberts, who was a former Marine and the son of a Pentecostal preacher, decided the world was too far gone. His solution was pretty simple. Ditch your job, your family, your name, and everything that makes life remotely comfortable, and just like that, you get instant salvation. Jim's pitch was basically live like the disciples, but like really live like them. So members gave up their homes, cash, IDs, and any ties to their past. They wandered around and scavenged from dumpsters, which is how they earned the nickname garbage eaters, and preached to strangers in public places. No flashy sermons and no televangelism. Just a beard, a Bible, and maybe a piece of bread from a gas station trash can. Being a member of this community was quite difficult, but joining wasn't any easier. First, you had to give up your family forever. Then you had to sew your own clothes, which were usually tunics with rope belts, and adopt the group's strict lifestyle. Women wore long, shapeless dresses, and men grew beards. They wore clothes too, but you get the point. Eventually, the media caught on. Parents launched search parties for their missing children, and the police got involved. So Jim Roberts made the group vanish. Literally. There was no more open preaching, no public appearances, and minimal communication with outsiders. Members were instructed to live off the grid, constantly moving and changing names and cities like spiritual fugitives. After Roberts' death in 2015, the elders took over leadership, and the group remained in the shadows. Today, the Brethren still exist, but you never know it because they have no social media and no mailing list. Just whispers, sightings, and the occasional long-lost son showing up on a Reddit thread. If someone you know joins the Brethren, chances are you'll never hear from them again. Happy Science. Happy Science sounds like it could be anything from a Japanese essential oil brand to a feel-good wellness app. But nope, it's actually a full-blown religious movement founded in 1986 by Ryuho Okawa, a former businessman who worked for a trading company in New York, who decided one day that he was, in fact, the human form of a celestial god being named El Cantare. According to their doctrine, El Cantare had been reincarnated throughout history as Buddha, Hermes, and even Odin. At first, the teachings of happy science sounds a lot like the stuff you would hear at a self-help seminar. Love others, pursue the truth, reflect on your flaws, and try to evolve as a person. It's all pretty wholesome, until you get to the part about angels, demons, alien spirits, and something called space spirit Yaidron. Since declaring himself the reincarnation of El Centauri, Okawa has released hundreds of books, many of which are spiritual messages he claims were channeled from dead historical figures. Jesus? Check. Confucius? Check. Abraham Lincoln? Also check. If you ever wondered what JFK thinks about Japan's foreign policy from beyond the grave, look no further. But that's not all. There's a dark twist. In the 90s, Happy Science got into it with Aum Shinrikyo, the cult behind the infamous Tokyo subway sarin attack. Aum allegedly tried to assassinate Okawa by pumping VX nerve gas into his vehicle's AC system. He survived the attack, so that's a win for El Centauri. While Happy Science was clashing with rival cults, it was also dealing with drama from within. Okawa's own son, Hiroshi, left the religion and publicly called it a scam. Okawa responded by claiming Hiroshi was possessed by demons and then sued him for defamation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Happy Science offered spiritual vaccines. They charged hundreds of dollars for rituals, DVDs, and blessings that supposedly boost your immunity. And then they claimed to remotely administer these vaccines once their New York temple shut down. Okawa passed away in 2023, but Happy Science is still going strong, with branches worldwide. Movies, books, political candidates, and lots of smiling PR. Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan. Yes, I mean the group in the white robes and pointed hoods has been around since 1865, and it's just as troubling as you'd expect. They're actually one of the most infamous hate groups in American history, with a long track record of racism, violence, and domestic terrorism. It all started in Tennessee, right after the Civil War, when a group of frustrated Confederate veterans formed what they claimed was a social club. The problem is that the club quickly devoted into night rides, church burnings, and lynchings aimed at black Americans and anyone who supported racial equality. Their leaders gave themselves names like Grand Wizard and Imperial Cyclops, which sounds less like a terrorist and more like a rejected X-Men villain. Though the first version of the Klan was officially disbanded in the 1870s, it didn't stay gone for long. In the 1920s, the second wave of the KKK appeared, and this time it was a nationwide thing. Fueled by anti-immigrant sentiment, religious bigotry, and the popularity of the film Birth of a Nation, the Klan went mainstream. They held massive parades, pushed white Protestant values, and counted millions of members, including politicians, judges, and police officers. It wasn't just about hate, it was about influence. By the 1950s and 60s, as the civil rights movement gained traction, the Klan re-emerged once again. Only this time, they were angrier and more violent. And that's saying something, since members of the first version used to burn churches for fun. The third wave was marked by bombings, assassinations, and targeted attacks on black communities and civil rights activists. In many towns, some members of law enforcement were Klan affiliated, which turned justice into a very one-sided affair. Thankfully, government crackdowns and internal divisions eventually weakened the Klan, and today it exists mostly in scattered factions. Tier 1. The Cult of Pythagoras, aka Pythagoreanism. This cult was founded in the 6th century BC by someone you'd never have guessed, math genius Pythagoras. He believed in a combination of science and mysticism. Understanding the cosmic order was their way to be one with the divine cosmos. For a math club, they also surprisingly believe in reincarnation. To achieve this, they had to keep their bodies pure, so no one was getting any play, which couldn't have been hard. The Pythagoreans believed that when you expelled your bodily fluids and even gas, you would lose a part of your soul. Now you know how you feel empty after every nightly session. They had their own sets of rules, like wearing white, remaining chaste, not peeing towards the sun, and avoiding beans for some reason. Maybe Pythagoras didn't want to be stuck with gassed-up dudes. If you didn't laugh, you haven't suffered at the hands of beans, and it shows. Moving on. The most important rule of the Pythagoras cult was that you don't talk about the Pythagoras cult. No joke, one of his followers was executed because he told a few of the teachings to the masses. Pythagoras, in true cult leader fashion, gave himself some stat upgrades. He was 3/4 of an avatar since he could predict earthquakes, calm the seas, and stop the wind. And he could also remember past lives. After the death of Pythagoras, which was ironically by fire, he was elevated to god status by his students, and his cult lived on. The Church of Copimism, or the Masonry Church of Copimism, was founded in Sweden in 2010 by Isaac Gerson and Gustav Nipe. This church considered the act of copying and sharing information to be divine and sacred, even calling it a virtue. Identity thieves are going to love this one. In true nerd fashion, they don't conduct physical congregations. They just meet up in a group chat and praise information before calling it a day. They even conduct rituals that involve the worship of information through copying, a practice known as copy acting. Their holy symbols are Control-C and Control-V. I swear I'm not making this up. This cult was officially recognized by the Swedish government in 2012, so you can join if it's up your alley. For legal purposes, that is a joke. John from Cargo Cult. To understand this cult, you'll need a history lesson. In World War II, America used small Pacific islands as strategic military bases to gain a foothold against Japan. These small Pacific islands had indigenous tribes who weren't as technologically advanced nor had much experience with the outside world. For the island tribes, the experience of seeing humans who wore weird clothes, spoke in tongues, had these magical portable cures, and could even take life without touching the other person was probably nothing short of meeting an alien or a god. Imagine if you brought someone from the Stone Age to this world. They would rightfully think we were magicians or gods. The tribes of these islands came to the same conclusion. They would worship the Americans as divine beings who blessed them with gifts. And their god was some American GI called John Frum. After World War II ended, America just packed up and left. But the tribes didn't really understand that concept. And so they came to the conclusion that these divine beings would come back if they imitated them and performed certain rituals. So they replicated what they could remember. They built planes, landing strips, and even control towers in hopes that their god John Frum would come back with their precious cargo. But surprisingly, no one humored these people, and they're still waiting for their cargo. The White Brotherhood. This cult was founded by Peter Konstantinov in 1897 in Bulgaria. Unlike Pythagoras, who was secretive and exclusive with his cult, these guys went international. From Bulgaria, this cult went on to spread to France, Canada, Switzerland, and Belgium. Their teachings were a mix of Christianity, mysticism, and spirituality. They believed humans were born with divinity, and to connect with that divinity, they do meditation, breathing exercises, and prayers. The white in their name does not refer to their skin color, rather it is the white magic they used against the evil black magic. They're all about equality, unity, and singing Kumbaya together. The Brotherhood's version of prophets were called Ascended Masters. These were people who had been reincarnated many times and had ascended to immortality. They were believed to be responsible for the guidance of the human race. Yeah, you guys might want to petition for a change in management. Some examples of Ascended Masters are Master Jesus, Confucius, Buddha, and Saint Mary. The Brethren, also known as the Garbage Eaters, was founded by Jimmy T. Roberts in the early 1970s. They were your average doomsday cult with teachings centered around how the end of times is coming soon, and humans need to purify themselves in preparation. To join the cult, you have to sell all your possessions and even break ties with your family. Basically, ditch everything but your existential dread. Members of the Brethren are forbidden from celebrating anything. No birthdays, not even Christmas. This is because they believe all celebrations should be kept for the end of times. Plus, they lived as nomads, collecting discarded food from dumpsters, hence the name. To recruit more members, they would just send out pairs to preach. But how do you convince people to join you if this is the life you're offering them? The Brethren's lifestyle and beliefs have led to controversy and criticism. Some former members have reported experiencing various forms of abuse, including excommunication of anyone who disagrees, manipulation and control of members, and a lack of accountability for leaders. So even when you have nothing, you can still be taken advantage of. Jim, the founder of the Brethren, died in 2015 at the age of 76 from cancer. The leadership role of the organization was passed to Jerry Williams, aka Brother Hatzer, and 3 other elders. The cult is believed to still be active. The Agon Shu, or Agama School, was founded in 1954 by Kiriyama Seiyu, based on the early Buddhist scriptures called Agamas. The Agon Shu basically follows the OG versions of the scriptures and teachings of Buddha, rejecting the deviations. They practice the 7 systems and 37 practices by Buddha mentioned in the early scriptures. The 7 systems are principles, and the 37 practices are pretty self-explanatory. Both of these are necessary to develop spiritually and attain enlightenment. Did anyone get enlightenment, you might ask? No. The cult never really defines what enlightenment is. They only give subjective definitions. You're better off getting enlightenment from watching paint dry. The Agon Shu grew to have more than 500,000 members, growing with the times. They hired a public relations company to spread the message, and even offered spiritual services through the internet. Seems pretty tame, right? But it never really is. The cult would convince followers to donate large sums of money for ancestor worship, which is basically a way to honor dead relatives through offerings of food or drink. They would also manipulate and control members by convincing them the spirits of their ancestors were infuriated with them. After the founder, Kiriyama, passed away, Agonshu became more obsessed with him rather than Buddha. The new leaders would claim to receive messages from Kiriyama from the spirit realm, and these messages were considered sacred. The cult was also dragged under the bus again during the Tokyo subway sarin attack. Not to spoil much, the founder of the cult that carried out the attack had briefly been a member of Agonshu. This connection led to people adopting a hostile attitude towards the cult. Appalachian Snake Church. The practice of snake handling in religious services originated in the Appalachian region of the United States in the early 20th century. It is often attributed to George Went Hensley, who brought a snake to a church service in 1909. Snake handlers base their practices on a literal interpretation of certain Bible verses, such as Mark chapter 16, verse 18. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. And Luke chapter 10, verse 19. Behold, I have given you the power to tread upon serpents and scorpions, and upon all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. They believe handling venomous snakes is a demonstration of their faith and obedience to God, even going as far as to claim anyone who died from getting bit by a snake simply wasn't faithful enough. This sounds like the witch trials all over again. If she's a witch, she'll live. If not, she'll die. Do you see the big brain logic? Snake handling was primarily practiced in small, isolated churches in the southern Appalachian region, particularly in Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. During services, believers will pick up and handle venomous snakes as an act of faith. Children are generally prohibited from participating, thank God. Ironically, George Hensley later on died from a snake bite. Karma does its work. The Church of Scientology. This is one of the more famous entries you've probably heard of. The Church of Scientology was founded in December 1953 by L. Ron Hubbard, a science fiction writer. Do I need to go on? Okay. In Scientology lore, in a faraway galaxy, there existed the Galactic Confederacy, ruled by an evil, tyrannical ruler, Xenu. The Galactic Confederacy was an ancient civilization that faced overpopulation, so to solve the problem, Xenu does what all dictators do: genocide. He throws them into the volcanoes on Earth, vaporizing them with hydrogen bombs. And here, their spirits, known as Thetans, attach themselves to all living things. Here's where Scientology comes in. They claim that by buying their course, you can control and harness the Thetan inside of you to gain various superhuman abilities. But this level of knowledge is locked behind many paywalls. To reach the level of operating Thetan, or OT, will cost you thousands, and that will only give you access to some information. To reach OT3, where you supposedly get the good stuff, you need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, along with a good portion of your time. I'll save your money and tell you where to find this super secret C-grade creation scripture. It's called Revolt in the Stars by the father of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, what do you expect? Just look at this building. Does it not look like Villain HQ? Their appraisal also stems from the fact that you can believe in any other religion while being a Scientologist, but saying everybody can enter doesn't mean everybody can leave. There's a lot of harassment involved for leaving, along with dissuasion tactics, and finally, an NDA. While celebrities like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Grant Cardone, Danny Masterson enjoy their relationship with the church, ex-members like Ron Miscavige, Katie Holmes, and Leah Remini have come out to expose what the cult is really like. David Miscavige, the current leader of the Church of Scientology, is working the marketing department to the bone, it seems. Upbeat music, flashy commercials, they even managed to get a Super Bowl commercial. All that marketing has another function though: burying their scandals and controversies. Either they bury the controversies or bury the source of the controversy. Allegedly. There are many deaths linked to the church, like Susan Meister, Edward McBride, Liz McPherson, and the leader's own wife, Shelley Miscavige. Tier 2. Kuman Thong. This cult is also associated with black magic, but on a much more disturbing level. Kuman Thong originates in Thailand, and its practitioners are essentially necromancers who seek out dead baby fetuses. The witch doctors, as they call themselves, would surgically remove the unborn fetus from the womb of its mother, roast it, and then paint it with yalak, a kind of lacquer used to cover amulets, and taproot with gold leaf. This is where the name Kuman Thong, meaning golden little boy, comes from. Why do they have this kind of morbid practice? Well, they believe these golden fetuses will bring good luck and fortune to the owner if properly worshipped. But they do say for every request you make of the Kumanthong, there is a consequence to bear. Which just sounds like a horror movie waiting to happen. Look at this. They're essentially spirits who can help humans for a price. They can see and hear for a distance of 20,000 kilometers, giving ample protection to any household. And because they're the souls of literal children, they are said to love playing tricks. Even with these cool, albeit dark little perks, the cult is heavily criticized by the Buddhist community and has been made illegal. Koan Kroch Cult. Another cult obsessed with fetuses is the Koan Kroch Cult, which is rooted in Southeast Asia, particularly in Cambodia. Now, these guys create amulets instead of golden baby corpse statues because I guess they needed a travel-size version. The amulet from the mummified fetus is obtained from either a dead or living mother. Followers of the cult believe that these amulets possess spiritual powers and can bring fortune to the owner. This taboo and unsettling practice is also heavily criticized, but has not yet been made illegal. 5% Nation, also known as the Nation of Gods and Earths. 5% Nation emerged from the teachings of Clarence Smith, a former member of the Nation of Islam. The beliefs of the 5% Nation are like the Nation of Islam, but on steroids. After leaving the Nation of Islam, Clarence renamed himself Allah the Father and began preaching about his belief. The name 5% Nation comes from a core belief of the cult that only 5% of the population holds the truth. 10% are oppressors and exploiters, and 85% are unaware and misled. The 5%ers reject the teachings of mainstream religion and instead focus on self-awareness, knowledge, personal empowerment, and most importantly, Black empowerment. They also believe that white people are literally the demons who have come up from hell. That explains this. And Black men are closer to, or the embodiment of the divine deity, Allah. The Black women are referred to as Earths, hence the name Nation of Gods and Earth for the people in the back. Now, this belief has landed them in hot waters, but the cult has been linked to gangs and criminal activities, especially in urban areas like New York City, so I don't think they care. They allegedly have influenced hip-hop artists, especially during the golden era of rap. Artists like Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, Wu-Tang Clan, Brand Nubian, Nas, and Jay-Z have either been members of the 5% Nation or incorporated its teachings into their music. Jay-Z was actually seen wearing a medallion associated with 5% Nation. The medallion of the 5% Nation has a 7 with a star and sun as part of its symbolism. The number 7 on the medallion represents God, the star symbolizes knowledge, and the sun represents the authority of God over the planets and stars, as well as the proper order of the universe. This symbolism reflects the core principles of knowledge, wisdom, and the divine nature of Black people within the universe. Though whether Jay-Z is an active member or not is unclear. The Church of the Firstborn. This cult is an offshoot or spin-off of the mainstream Mormon church founded in the 1950s by Joel LeBaron. Being an offshoot, their belief system differs from mainstream Mormonism. They consider the Bible the ultimate source of doctrines and practices. They also rejected the Christian interpretation of the Holy Trinity, where they described God as 3 separate persons: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Church of Firstborn used the term non-Trinitarianism to describe their stance. Non-Trinitarianism is the belief that God is one indivisible unity, or exists as 3 manifestations of himself. The Christian belief is that God exists as 3 distinct entities, and some people just stop at God exists, ? The cult is very patriarchal and encourages polygamy. They also don't believe in medicine, going as far as to call it a weakness of faith or even a sin. Instead, they opted for faith healing, which is basically pray the gay away, but with illnesses. The church was slammed with manslaughter lawsuits because of this, and legal action was also taken against individuals, such as parents who let their kids be victims of faith healing. The Church of Firstborn holds many beliefs that are considered controversial, such as rejecting participation in war, advocating for traditional gender roles where women are expected to stay at home and care for children, and promoting the practice of greeting each other with a holy kiss. The founder, Joel LeBaron, was murdered in 1972. The hit was allegedly orchestrated by his own brother, Ervil LeBaron, who is just 1 letter away from his true form. But we'll be getting into that later on. The Love Israel family. This was a communal cult founded in 1968 by Paul Erdman, who later changed his name to Love Israel. Members of the cult collectively adopted a single surname, Israel, along with biblical first names. The core teachings of the cult were love, oneness, and bringing the presence of God into everyday family life. The name Love Israel is a play on one of their 4 affirmations, love is real. The other 3 are we are one, love is the answer, and now is the time. The commune says it had ground marriages, but it's mainly Paul or Love just trying to catch 'em all. He created his own harem, enforcing a strict rule: no outside relationships and no birth control. He would also loan his wives to elders who worked below him. He held complete authority and power within the group. His word was law for them. He controlled the finances of the group and demanded obedience if they wanted to remain there and be taken care of. The members were subjected to strict discipline, being told how to dress, eat, and behave. The hierarchical structure of the group didn't really let the parents raise the children. According to the cult, they weren't your children anymore. They were our children. A layer of elders operated just beneath Love Israel, overseeing houses, managing business affairs, and addressing social concerns. This being a patriarchal family structure, the women were on the back burner, following the traditional gender dynamics. They also conducted rituals like animal sacrifices as part of their spiritual practice. The Church of Euthanasia. Well, this one, albeit shocking, is pretty self-explanatory. The Church of Euthanasia was founded by Chris Korda in the 1990s. It mainly advocates for population control through voluntarily pressing Control-Delete on life. The idea of the church came from where all religious cults start, a dream. Chris Korda was visited by an intelligent alien life form and warned about Earth's dying ecosystem. The church is built on 4 pillars: suicide, abortion, cannibalism, and sodomy. They believe these pillars are the only way to curb population growth and environmental degradation. Now, why haven't these people committed mass suicides? The founder actually answers in a cute little FAQ section on their official website. Suicide is surprisingly optional in the cult. Chris Korda specifically said she'll delete herself when she feels like it. The website once had detailed steps on how to delete yourself, but they took it down after someone actually did it using their instructions. The body was found with a printout from the website, so there was no denying it for them. I just want to mention that their reason for encouraging cannibalism is that eating animals hurts the environment, and humans are in abundance, so you might as well solve your problem there. Either dead or consensually, of course. They're not monsters. And there are people who believe that the church is either a performance art piece or just not that serious. They just want to reduce human impact on the environment, albeit through a little radical means. But I'll leave the decision up to you. The Church of the Subgenius. Ivan Stang and Philo Drummond founded the Church of the Subgenius in the late 1970s. When you go up looking for answers as to what the church is on its website, you get this response: pity the poor human earthpink who comes looking for a simple, short explanation of the Church of the Subgenius, TM. One that he or she can understand quickly. If the church could provide that, it would be bigger than Islam or Christianity by now, and probably much, much worse. Talk about an introduction. The group has been described as a performance art piece, irony, satire, or a money-grabbing scheme. But that's a lot of energy invested into a joke. The prophet of the Church of Subgenius is a fictional salesman from the 1950s, J.R. Bob Dobbs. To attain enlightenment status, members must follow 4 laws: stop working, buy the church products, go against law and order, further the goals of the church by harnessing the power of fear, and eliminate anyone who is not of the Yeti lineage. Yes, the church believes that the members are descended from Yetis. The Church of Subgenius is also a doomsday cult. They believed an alien would come to destroy everything and would only spare those who paid the church. How convenient. Tier 3. The Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. Now that's a mouthful of a name. Also known as the Unification Church for short, was founded on May 1st, 1954 in South Korea by Sun Myung Moon. When Moon was 16 years old, he was visited by Jesus himself and asked to finish the task of establishing God's kingdom. Now, Moon's interpretation of biblical events is interesting, as it lays the foundation for the rituals of his church. In his book, The Divine Principle, he details that mankind is part of a sinful lineage because Eve was influenced by the devil to do the deed with Adam. So, we're out here fighting intrusive thoughts because some people couldn't keep it in their pants? Now, of course, he was the only one who could solve this problem that he created. As the second coming of Jesus, he would pick out couples to wed. He and his wife would bless them as true parents, and they could become a true family free of sin. Sounds like a guy just trying to make the world a better place, right? Well, no. Members of the church would be encouraged to do spiritual sales, which involved scamming people into thinking they were in contact with the family's deceased loved one. They would sell them various items to guarantee the salvation of the deceased loved one. Members of the church were also coerced to donate, with some donating outrageous amounts outside their means. But this wasn't all. The cult is surprisingly well organized, working in over 100 countries currently, and even have a leg in policy through their deep political ties. Many of Japan's high-ranking politicians, including the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, have allegedly been linked to the Unification Church. Political corruption, orgies and scandals, financial coercion, and scamming aside, this cult has become the cause of death of Shinzo Abe. His murderer was the son of a grieving mother who was financially taken advantage of by the church. The murderer's life was just a roller coaster of tragedy after tragedy. I'll leave that for the paragraph guy in the comments. Also, Moon's dead, but the cult lives on through his wife and children. The Coconut Cult, or more popularly known as Sonnenorden, Order of the Sun, was founded by August Engelhardt, a German nudist and vegetarian in 1902. The belief system is rather simple: the unconditional worship of the sun and coconuts, considering the coconut as the pinnacle of all living things on Earth. Engelhardt saw a coconut and then he looked at the sun and came to the conclusion that coconuts were the closest fruit to the sun, even though oranges were right there too. Anyway, he thought coconuts embodied solar energy and divine nourishment. His philosophy revolved around the idea that continuous consumption of coconuts would lead to immortality. I guess philosopher's stones are out and pina coladas are in. In another version, Engelhardt believed that the fruit resembled the human head and was the most suitable food for humans. He even allegedly wrote devotional poems and treatises extolling the virtues of coconuts, viewing them as a divine creation closely linked to human existence. So the members of the cult stayed on a coconut-only diet to gain immortality. But of course, this diet has severe health consequences for many of his followers. Malnutrition, various deficiencies, and illnesses like malaria became prevalent due to the lack of a balanced diet. Some even died. Because they were obsessed with coconuts, followers of the cult faced social isolation and disconnection from mainstream society. Engelhardt's obsession with coconuts and sun worship led to his own mental and physical deterioration. He became delusional and fanatic over the years, and so the German government eventually banned the cult. The Family International, previously known as Children of God. This cult was founded by David Brandberg. And I know the name sounds really nice, but after coming this far into the list, you're too smart to be fooled by names. David Berg was messed up way before he started his cult. His childhood could be summed up as a strict con-woman Christian mother, violating punishments, incestuous thoughts, and too much time with his right hand. All the ingredients to create the not-so-perfect cult leader. He started the cult in the 1960s, after the high of the hippie way of life was coming down. He preached about the end times and how the system was against them. Yes, David Berg was the OG red pill alpha male who could save them from the system, one orgy at a time. But unlike most cult leaders, David didn't claim to be God. Rather, he claimed to be a prophet of God. How humble. To recruit more members for the cult, he would send out attractive women and tell them to share God's love with other men, seducing them into joining the cult. Basically religious prostitution, but also called flirty fishing. Needless to say, the tactic worked, and the cult gained thousands more members. As the cult got more members, David's preaching turned from fight the system to God wants us to be polygamous and share wives so that we can get into heaven. David's tactics to control his flock were simply fear, distraction, and deprivation. Members would give up all their possessions when they joined. He would then assign them to one of 12 groups he referenced from the Bible, and they would be put to work. From morning to night, he would not allow these poor souls time to think. He kept them busy and distracted with memorizing verses or work. Why did people stay in the cult? I don't know, maybe you guys can explain better in the comments below. David would promote polygamy, activities with children, wife sharing, incest, orgies, and just a lot of very, very disgusting activities. I probably can't talk in detail about some of the stuff this old degenerate sack of skin did without getting demonetized, but just know whatever you can imagine, it was worse. On a positive note, all these orgies had their unintended consequences. Herpes. Not enough karma, but at least some karma. In 1994, the world would finally be rid of the human stain that is David Berg, but the cult would continue under his second wife, Karen Zerby. It was at this point that they changed the name to Family International. They currently have more than 10,000 members in over 90 countries. Do they still do the same activities? Well, they say no, but who can say for sure? Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, was founded in China in 1992 by Li Hongzhi. Originally, Falun Gong started out based on the traditional Chinese beliefs and practices focused on improving physical health and spiritual well-being. Li initially started out taking advantage of the booming popularity of Qigong, a Chinese deep breathing exercise technique. While he was practicing Qigong as a state-registered master, he began telling his spiritual journey to people. And yes, he was basically the second coming of Jesus. According to his claims, he could become invisible, travel through space, and levitate. In truth, he was just a clerk at some company. But I guess what they don't know won't hurt them. Li published a guide of his teachings for his growing followers, and this had some very interesting theories, to say the least. He promised people they could gain supernatural abilities like eternal youth, invisibility, and mind control, but only if they weren't gay or married to someone of another race. Li believed that mixed children did have a place in heaven, as it was racially segregated. And then he gets weirder. Li claimed aliens are trying to corrupt mankind through science. All the modern innovations like computers, airplanes, modern medicine, etc. were given to humans by the aliens. Why, you ask? Well, because they want to replace humans and live on Earth. I don't know what's crazier, his ideas or the aliens actually considering living on this crumbling planet. The members were also expected to devote their entire lives to Li Hongzhi and the cult. They would be monitored and pressured to follow the teachings without question. Li's growing popularity and absolutely brainwashed followers were being noticed by the secular Chinese government, especially after Li ordered that responding to criticism from the government would be an essential step in gaining enlightenment. Maybe Li thought he was untouchable with his 2 to 3 million followers, but he was playing with fire here and it finally burned him. After brutally suppressing many protests in 1999, China officially banned Falun Gong. It's never as simple as just passing an order with China. The crackdown on Falun Gong members led to cases of torture, disappearances, enforced ideological conversions, forced labor, and even death. The Creativity Movement. Formerly known as the Church of the Creator, it was founded by Ben Klassen in 1973. It was called a church, but in reality, they were an atheist group that believed in a form of social Darwinism. They claimed that the fittest race should be the one to dominate, and by that, they meant white people. Sound familiar? Ben Klassen was a big fan of Hitler, calling him a pioneer, and even actively recruited neo-Nazis into the group. The Creativity Movement preached that race, not religion, embodies absolute truth, and the white race was the pinnacle of culture and civilization. I shortened it for you, there's a lot of self-praise here. They considered themselves as some kind of warriors who are in a racial holy war, where non-white subhuman mud races are trying to subjugate white people. And to prevent humanity from descending into slavery and misery, the white race must win. I wish I was kidding. Before they could win their holy war, Ben Klassen committed suicide in 1993, and another member, Matt Hale, took over the leadership, and the group became even more violent. But thankfully, in 2004, he was arrested for soliciting the murder of a federal judge who had ruled against him and the movement in a lawsuit. After his arrest, the group remains largely inactive. Tier 4. Universal Medicine. Serge Benayan, a former bankrupt tennis coach from Australia who has no medical qualifications, is the man behind the cult, Universal Medicine. This cult promotes healing through energy, also known as esoteric healing. Their practices included techniques like esoteric breast massage, chakra puncture, ovarian readings, and esoteric connective tissue therapy. All of these intended to balance the body's energy field and promote self-healing, but of course would get very inappropriate very fast. One man reported that he felt an assigned massager probe his buttocks, and when asked why, he said he pulled out an evil energy snake from his back door. So if you've been feeling a little iffy down there, maybe you have an evil energy snake that needs to be pulled out too. Reincarnation and karma are other important tenets in their belief system. They claim that any health issues are due to your karma from a past life. Building on that concept, they firmly believe that people who have a disability or have been assaulted are the reincarnation of evil historical figures. But of course, Serge Benayan traces his lineage back to history's A-lists, from Plato to Jesus, and even throws in a sprinkle of reincarnated Da Vinci for extra spice. So naturally, with this super legit family tree, he obviously has to become humanity's savior. This man claims there is a master race of footless, 9-foot-tall aliens or supernatural entities who are always around sniffing humans. Why, you ask? Well, they apparently love the smell of a person of God. I guess the only way to throw off your scent would be to smear yourself in Epstein's blood. But if blood makes you queasy, don't worry. Serge has a more or less morbid solution. To prevent these entities or aliens from entering the human body, there are certain foods you'd have to avoid, like carrots, potatoes, coffee, dairy, and even gluten. Why even bother with eating at this point? It seems Serge agrees because along with the restrictive diet, he also restricted his followers to only eating one meal a day. For an adult, this might suffice, but the problem is children as young as 10 months old were being forced to follow this diet as well. Even after people were getting ill from this diet, his followers continued to blindly obey him, to the point of excommunicating their family members and leaving all their wealth to universal medicine, aka Serge. The reason they do this is because Serge has brainwashed them to believe that if parents leave wealth to their children, it will harm them in their next life. How convenient for Serge. Serge was very much enjoying his transformation from a broke tennis coach to a millionaire, but things won't go his way for long. In 2019, the New South Wales Supreme Court recognized that universal medicine was a socially harmful cult, and Serge Benignan was a fake who inappropriately touched his clients and girls as young as 10 who stayed in his house. But Serge had no remorse for his actions and published a pseudo-interview on his Universal Medicine's YouTube channel, claiming he was the victim of an internet witch hunt. The Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple was founded in 1984 in Geneva, Switzerland, by Luc Jouret and Joseph de Mombro. The order was based on the ideals of a medieval military religious order called the Knights Templar, and they took this very seriously, with the capes, swords, secret rituals, and meetings. Why not just play a game of D&D at this point? One way to join the cult would be by being introduced by someone who is already a member, and the other way was just paying your way in. This was a very useful method to gain some funds and build connections for the cult at the same time. And so, like many cults, the Order of the Solar Temple also had power, money, and exploitation at the core of its system. The leaders of the cult, Jouret and de Mombro, would use their position to exploit the female members of the cult. They even broke up marriages, claiming none of the pairs were cosmically compatible, and then proceeded to get down and dirty with the recently single wives. The more the cult grew, the more delusional the teachings became. Luc Jouret believed that he was the third reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and de Mombro believed his children were messiahs who would bring about the new age after the apocalypse. And the only way to prepare themselves for this high spiritual existence was purification through fire. In 1994, one of the members, Tony Dutoit, who helped deceive the followers with illusions, would reveal the fraud of the leaders, but this angered Jouret and Mombro. The cult leaders declared that Tony's infant son was the Antichrist. This declaration served as enough of a reason to execute a ritual murder of Tony Dutoit, his wife, and his 18-month-old son. The family was lured to one de Mombro's villas where they were stabbed to death. The two cult members who murdered them set fire to the villa, unaliving themselves as well. Just a few hours after this, authorities would discover 22 bodies from a burned-down lodge in Switzerland, and 25 more bodies from another temple. This was only the beginning, as between 1994 to 1997, 74 more people died. Did they go willingly or not is unclear. The bodies do have gunshot wounds and bruises, but they could be part of some morbid ritual. Surprisingly, the Order of the Solar Temple is still around and remains very secretive. The Nuwaubian Nation. The Nuwaubian Nation, founded and led by Dwight York, emerged in Brooklyn in the early 1970s. York was heavily influenced by the Nation of Islam's ideology of black supremacy, so he began his own black Muslim group to get a piece of the pie. York either knew what he was doing too well or he had no idea and was winging it. I'd bet my money on the latter, because over time, York changed the group's teachings and names multiple times, incorporating concepts from various religions and esoteric beliefs, gaining some followers from all his various beliefs. It's astounding to think people would trust themselves to someone who just wakes up every day and says, "No, this is the right religion today." It doesn't even stay in the same theological categories. Nubian Nation came into being in 1991 on one such day. York moved his followers to a remote area and built an ancient Egypt-themed compound. They had 2 pyramids, obelisks, and statues of Egyptian leaders. The belief system of the cult is rather bizarre and complex. They're a mix of black supremacist ideas, Egyptian worship, UFO conspiracy theories, the Illuminati, throw in some Abrahamic religious teachings, and just a smidge of Eastern philosophy. This man was playing gotta catch 'em all religion version. And of course, at the center of this belief system was York himself, as God. And as God, he was entitled to everything his followers could offer. Their time, finances, resources, their wives, and even themselves. York would often put the men to work, and while they worked, he'd have his way with their wives. He kept families separate and often engaged in intimate behavior with men, women, and also children. In one case, he adopted a girl illegally from Uganda and proceeded to treat her like a slave, even withholding food, forcing her to sleep on the floor, and violating her. This does have a positive end. In 2004, York was sentenced to 135 years in prison for molesting children and other crimes. After York was arrested, the Nubian Nation declined, with most followers abandoning the group. But it's still around. The Church of the Lamb of God. Remember the Church of the Firstborn led by Joel LeBaron? Well, now we continue the story after he was allegedly murdered by his brother. The Church of the Lamb of God was founded by Ervil LeBaron. As all cult leaders do, Ervil threatened to execute those who refused to accept him as God's representative and obey him. Whether they were a part of the church or not, everyone had to believe him. He brings back the former Mormon principle of blood atonement to use against anyone he deemed a threat. Blood atonement is pretty self-explanatory. To save the souls of people who committed a sin, they needed to atone with their blood. The group was very violent, with an estimated 20 to 30 murders attributed under their belt. The church was also polygamous, with Ervil having 13 wives and at least 25 to 50 children. And he wasn't just abusing the women and children of his family, he was doing it to all the members of his cult. He was doing everything nasty under the sun, abusing members of his cult, indoctrination, assault, child abuse, underage marriages, human trafficking, and the list goes on. Because of all the violence and abuse, the cult would move around quite often. Did all the moving stop them from being violent? Nope. They continued this pattern till Ervil was finally sentenced to life in prison for ordering the murder of rival Mormon cult leader Rulon C. Allred in 1977. Ervil became paranoid in prison and thinks his former followers are betraying him. He writes a hit list for his children and uses the blood atonement practice to convince them to murder the lost followers. And one of his sons takes it seriously. His son plans a series of murders together with some other members. He murdered many of his brothers and sisters along with other cult members. And Ervil would die in prison at the age of 56 in 1981, which seems like an easy death for a very depraved man. The Raelian movement, also known as Raelism, was founded in 1974 by Claude Virilin. Claude started the cult after coming into contact with aliens in France. These aliens chose to impart knowledge of the origin of humanity to him and appointed him as their messenger. He was then tasked to prepare the Earth for their arrival. Claude rose to the occasion, renaming himself Rael and establishing Raelism. He began preaching to others that humans weren't created by God, rather they were created by highly intelligent alien life forms called Elohim. Rael is the last prophet among a line of prophets including, but not limited to, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. The cult is hierarchical, with different membership levels from 0 to 6, with Rael holding the highest position as prophet. Their practices are also just as bizarre as their beliefs. Raelians practice sensual meditation, a guided meditation technique that aims to transmit their love to the Elohim. The ultimate goal of the meditation is to achieve a cosmic orgasm. They're really giving reaching nirvana a whole new meaning. Surprisingly, this cult also fought for many progressive causes like LGBTQ rights, bodily autonomy, peace, and also against female genital mutilation, which is called clitorade. And I just want to know what went on in their mind. Financial exploitation is basically like a subscription service where members of the cult are encouraged, not forced, to donate 10% of their income to finance the construction of an embassy for Elohim in Jerusalem and to maintain a pure genetic code by avoiding caffeine, cigarettes, and recreational drugs. I think some drugs might do them well because if they're like this sober, I need to see what they'd be like high. Raelians are also big on cloning. They believe immortality can be achieved by advanced cloning. They claim to have successfully cloned a female baby, but for privacy reasons, they will not show her to the world. Unlike other cults or religions, you don't have to die to meet the gods that created you. Rael prophesies that the Elohim will return in 2035, and if humanity doesn't have its shit together and doesn't build him a welcome back embassy on neutral territory, one of two things will happen. Either humans get obliterated or they just won't share their advanced technology with us. But if the Elohim decides to stay, they will establish a geniocracy, where only people who are 50% above the mean IQ can hold office, and people 10% above the mean can vote. So if the average IQ is 100, the lowest IQ for a candidate would be 150, and for a vote would be 110. More than half the US won't be able to vote in this government. But as always, the good never lasts with cults. There are accusations that the cult advocates for children to be more intimately active. 2 former members were even found guilty of systematically corrupting teenage girls in 2006. Rael also recruits attractive women into his Order of Angels, who either fulfill Rael's depraved desires or save themselves for the Elohim when they return. But Rael can still go all the way with them because he belongs to the prophet bloodline, which connects to the supreme alien Yahweh. Even with these criticisms, the cult thrives with over 80,000 members worldwide. They aren't as can murder you, will murder you, but based on the sheer absurd claims, I couldn't help but place them higher on this list. Tier 5. The Agori. The name is derived from the Sanskrit word agor, meaning fearless. The Agori are based on Hinduism, in the sense that they just took everything taboo in Hinduism and made a cult out of it. 2 of the Hindu goddesses, Shiva the Destroyer and Kali the goddess of death, are central to their belief system and practices. The Agori embrace the death in everything they do, whether it's living near cremation sites or rubbing the ashes of some poor guy all over themselves. They justify this by saying their practices help destroy the ego inside humans and help them see the beauty in everything, even death. Also, they believe it protects them from diseases. They also see no difference between good and evil or between human and animal flesh. Great. Cannibalism, just what we needed on this list. If it helps you feel better, they don't eat live humans, only dead ones. The Agori consume human flesh from corpses that are brought for cremation. The Agori also renounce all their attachments to the material world and, by extension, material objects. Sadly, that includes clothes as well. They often remain only in a loincloth or nude. Speaking of controversial choices, they also use human skulls as utensils, as it helps them break the barrier between life and death. The Agori are also associated with black magic and the use of intoxicants. They use a shortcut to enlightenment, using a little liquid courage to break down those spiritual barriers. It's unconventional, but hey, whatever works, right? Superior Universal Alignment. Another UFO cult on this list. Superior Universal Alignment was founded by Valentina de Andrade in 1981. She claimed that aliens contacted her and told her that humanity was on its way to destruction. But like the Raelians, she and her followers would be saved if they followed the aliens' warnings. She preached that Jesus was also an alien sent down to Earth to guide mankind towards salvation, and that males born after 1981 are embodiments of evil that need to be exterminated. This is the first I've heard of discrimination based on birth year. These embodiments of evil would be used as sacrifices for the aliens she met, and she wasn't kidding. Between 1981 and 1993, 19 Brazilian boys aged 8 to 14 were kidnapped, mutilated, assaulted, and left to die in the woods. The cult members who carried out these grotesque murders were prominent individuals. People you wouldn't think would be capable of this, like doctors, businessmen, and policemen. In 2003, several members were found guilty and sentenced. But the head of the snake, Valentina, was let go. The cult is still active today. The Manson family. Another violent entry is the Manson family, founded by Charles Manson in the late 1960s. Charles sharpened his philosophical claws while in prison, and when he was released, he quickly established himself as a guru. Manson preached about the end of times and how he, like all before him, was the manifestation of Jesus. Are there no original ideas anymore? Manson radicalized his followers by convincing them that they were in an apocalyptic race war that would bring about the end times, which he called helter-skelter. But when Manson lost patience in the war happening by itself, he tried to set it off himself. Why, you ask? Well, Manson believed that the race war would be won by black people. Once the superior race had been established, he and his followers would emerge to rule over black people. Now I know these guys were taking a lot of drugs. Manson sent his followers on a murder spree to kickstart Helter Skelter. On August 9, 1969, Manson family members Susan Atkins, Tex Watson, and Patricia Krenwinkel entered the home of Hollywood actress Sharon Tate and murdered her and 4 others, including Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, and Stephen Parent. These came to be known as the Tate murders. The gruesome nature of the murders made headlines, but did not start the war Manson was hoping for. Rather, they led to his capture. In 1971, Manson and several of his followers were convicted of the Tate murders, and they were also indicted in the LaBianca murders. Manson, Watson, Atkins, Kasabian, and Krenwinkel were sentenced to death, but their sentences were commuted to life in prison after California abolished the death penalty in 1972. And in 2017, Manson died in prison at the age of 83. Heaven's Gate. The cult was founded by Marshall Applewhite and wife Bonnie Nettles in 1974. The two had only 2 years, and in that time, I don't know how many drugs they did. But they came to the conclusion that they were the 2 end-time witnesses mentioned in the Bible, and so they kickstarted their campaign. This was also a UFO cult, as they believed the Earth was about to be annihilated, and the only way to save ourselves would be to, you guessed it, listen to Marshall and Nettle. Heaven's Gate promised its followers that they would be saved and taken to the kingdom of heaven via a soul-sucking spaceship. And many, many people were convinced by this and joined to live in isolation in preparation for their ascension. But 2 things started to break the illusion for many members. 1, the date prophesied by Marshall and Nettle passed, and the world was still here. This they glossed over by giving a new prophecy. And 2, the death of Nettle. When someone who claims to be an immortal being from a higher dimension of existence dies, people start questioning what's going on. But Marshall was smart, or insane, or both. He simply said that Nettle went first to make preparations for us. In 1997, when the Halley-Bopp comet was predicted to appear, they believed that it was the apocalyptic time prophesied, and decided it was time to shed their earthly bodies and hop aboard the spaceship. So, a total of 39 members of the cult matched their dressing and committed mass suicide. It wasn't done instantly together, more like in batches. Each member wore the same black shirt and sweatpants with Nike shoes and $5.75 in their pockets. Their website is still up, and apparently if you email them, they respond. The Anthill Kids. Arguably one of the most disturbing and disgusting cults on this list. The Anthill Kids was established by Roche Thériault in Canada. In the beginning, Roche's cult was based on the Seventh-day Adventist beliefs, but with his own interpretations. I mean, everyone else was doing it, so why not? He was extremely charismatic and good with words. 2 important qualities for a cult leader, I guess. Roche had gained a few supporters from his time at a Seventh-day Adventist church, and these vulnerable young adults would later move in with him. After gaining a decent following, he isolated them in a cabin in the woods. And just like that movie, this story also doesn't have a good ending. His followers were stripped of their identities as he gave them new names, and they were starving and sleep-deprived, so naturally they were very obedient to Roche. And when he suggested every woman in the cult should be married to him, they had no choice but to agree. Roche's violent and sadistic tendencies were also at an all-time high. Members, even the children and pregnant women, were subjected to all kinds of abuse, including getting a few ribs broken for eating too many pancakes, being nailed to trees, or even having their limbs removed. He would even make them break their own legs with sledgehammers. The list goes on, but let's stop there. Roche believed as a vessel of God he could cure all illnesses. He would perform surgeries on members, like removing their teeth, botched circumcisions, and even castrations. If you're asking yourself why wasn't anyone helping, well, Roche portrayed this image of a free-spirited, happy commune to the media, who wrote positive articles about the anthill kids. But Roche's sadistic rampages would soon be his downfall. Roche performed another one of his healing operations on a woman named Solange, who had stomach pains. He would proceed to cut her open and rip out her intestines with his bare hands and then crudely stitch her up and leave her there. She died, but that wasn't enough for Roche, so he dug her up again and, well, let's just sum it up with skull necrophilia. In 1993, he was convicted for the murder of Solange and one of the many infants he murdered. He received a life sentence and was later executed by a cellmate in 2011. Aum Shinrikyo, also known as Aum and Aleph, was founded by Shoko Asahara in 1987. Shoko Asahara started the cult as a yoga and meditation class, and he, like all the others before him and those that would come after him, claimed that a god came down from the heavens and appointed him as the god of light to fight against all evil. Their beliefs were pretty standard as cults go. Doomsday was around the corner and only the people who followed Shoko Asahara would be saved. He also convinced members of the cult that disobedience of his orders would result in being reincarnated as animals or being thrown in different hells. To be allowed into the cult, you had to pay a hefty entrance fee and consume various parts of Shoko Asahara, like his hair, blood, bathwater, or, least disgusting, his leftovers. You also had to give up all your worldly possessions and live in the commune. You'd think by now people would pick up on the pattern here. None of this deterred members from joining, rather. Aum Shinrikyo grew exponentially, attracting academics, engineers, doctors, chemists, and even military personnel. But Asahara wasn't satisfied with the numbers, so he used a popular Japanese form of media, anime. It must have worked because Asahara went on to publish a manga too. I won't bore you with the plot, it was just propaganda. But all of this was still not enough, so he declared himself, you guessed it, Jesus Christ. To his credit, he added another title of Enlightened One. Asahara would rule the cult with an iron fist, isolating members from the outside world and gaslighting them into doubting themselves, to the point that the only person they trust is Asahara. Aum Shinrikyo would also threaten and physically assault people if they tried to leave. The families of the members of the cult would plead to the media outlets, and one anti-cult lawyer, Tsutsumi Sakamoto, would jump in to help and prepare to launch a lawsuit against Aum Shinrikyo and also make a documentary of sorts destroying the divine image of Asahara with proof. But tragedy struck when the footage was leaked to the cult before it could be aired. Tsutsumi Sakamoto, along with his wife and infant child, disappeared overnight. I won't leave you in suspense. They were brutally membered by members of the cult, and their bodies wouldn't be found till 6 years later when the sarin attack happened. But this display of intimidation didn't work, and people continued to work against the cult. And Shoko Asahara decided it was time to work on a higher scale. The chemists and military personnel of the cult came together to create sarin gas, which is an odorless and colorless gas that will murder you in the most painful way possible within 10 minutes. They tested the gas first on a neighborhood, and 10 people died, but it wasn't linked to Aum Shinrikyo. And on March 20, 1995, carried out their main attack on the busiest Tokyo subway station. Cult members released the inside of it to the train, resulting in 13 deaths and 6,000 injured. Shoko Asahara and 6 other members were sentenced to death. Asahara's sentence was carried out on July 6, 2018. Aum Shinrikyo separated into 2 cults, Aleph and the Circle of Light. Both deny any relation to Shoko Asahara's teaching, but with cults, you never know. People's Temple, the cult that is infamous for the mass murder-suicide of 909 members in Jonestown. Jim Jones started the People's Temple in Indianapolis, where he preached a mix of Christian and socialist ideologies. And because this was the 1950s, he attracted many African Americans with his woke vision of an integrated congregation. Jones would also perform these miracles, which were fake, of course, but the people ate it up. Like, how do they not find the guy who wears sunglasses indoors and at night sus? Jones was very charismatic, with an enthusiastic worship style he copied from black preachers and speakers. He was like an evil little white Les Brown. His style, fake miracles, and leftist sermons gained him a massive following.
Jones wanted to build his own private utopia, so he invited these people to live in a commune, which went well for a while, but with his narcissistic god complex, it was bound to fail at some point. His cult drew criticism from the media with accusations of financial fraud, physical mistreatment of members, and abuse of children in its care. Members of the cult were reportedly beaten, sleep-deprived, and forced to go through loyalty tests, which is self-explanatory. Jones didn't allow anyone to leave, going as far as threatening to murder them if they did. And just when you think Jones couldn't get worse, he does. He would take advantage of all members, male or female, of his cult. Anyone who rebelled was instantly punished with reduced food rations, harsher work schedules, public ridicule, humiliation, and sometimes physical violence. To escape the bad press and keep his hold on his cult, he took his followers to Guyana in 1977. He convinced them to come by telling them the world was ending soon. And the abuse continued there as well. Jones would often hold white night rehearsals, where he'd play mind games with members, telling them they had been poisoned when it was just Kool-Aid. Jones also pitted members against each other by asking them to turn in anyone who wanted to leave. In November 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan of California visited Jonestown at the request of concerned relatives of the cult members. All seemed well on the surface, but after a while, some members would tell him they wanted to leave. Ryan and his party took the 20-plus defectors of the cult to the airstrip with them. This made Jones furious and unhinged, and so he does what any insane cult leader does. He sends an armed party to murder them. Congressman Leo and many others at the airstrip were murdered by the armed temple members. Back in Jonestown, Jim Jones spiraled into madness fueled by his paranoia. He gathered all of his followers and convinced them that more people would come here and take their children away to torture them. He said the only way to escape perceived threats of the outside world was revolutionary suicide, as if normal suicide isn't morbid enough. The children were the first to be given cyanide-laced Kool-Aid to make sure parents would not have any reason to resist. Many of the adults were forced to drink the Kool-Aid at gunpoint, and some had cyanide injected into them. Some drank it willingly, staying loyal to Jones till the end. Jones, being the coward that he was, didn't drink the Kool-Aid, rather died via a gunshot wound to the head. The death toll from this mass murder-suicide was 909 people, with 304 children under the age of 18. That's all the cults we have today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, kids, if someone tells you they can save your soul, run.
You're up at 2 a.m., phone screen burning holes in your retinas. One link says some people can survive on pure cosmic energy instead of food. Sure. Then 3 clicks later, you land on a forum where the members claim the most ethical thing you can do for Earth is stop existing. And that's when you realize the internet didn't just invent weird hobbies. It gave cults a second life. This is the disturbing online cult Iceberg. Let's get into it. Tier 1. QAnon. What if I told you a cryptic internet post once convinced thousands of people that the world was secretly run by child-eating elites? That's exactly what happened in 2017 when someone calling themselves Q made a post on 4chan that read, "The message read calm before the storm." It was short, cryptic, and just mysterious enough to send conspiracy theorists into overdrive. According to Q, the storm was going to be a massive government takedown of thousands of powerful people who were secretly child-eating PDF files. Q claimed to have Q clearance, which supposedly gave them access to top-secret government intelligence. In reality, no one knew if Q was a single person, a group, or just a bored troll who thought they were living in the Matrix. By late 2017, Q's posts had escalated into full-blown conspiracy theories, and some were so extreme they sounded like rejected movie plots. One claimed there was a video of Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin unaliving a child and drinking its blood, and another said Trump's enemies would soon commit mass self-killing. There were also predictions that Mark Zuckerberg would abandon Facebook and the United States entirely, and that Kim Jong-un was actually a CIA puppet. Almost none of these predictions came true, but that didn't slow anyone down. In Q's version of reality, Donald Trump was secretly fighting a global cabal of Satan-worshipping child mistreaters who controlled the world. Q's followers clung to every post like scripture, ready to back the cause in any way they could. They even set up live streams on YouTube to discuss intel, ask for donations, and recruit new believers. When Q decided 4chan had been infiltrated, they all moved to 8chan, where the theories multiplied even faster. Then came the big offline moment. In July 2018, QAnon spilled into the real world at a Trump rally in Florida. Dozens showed up in Q shirts, waving Q slogans on signs. A handful even co-authored a book called QAnon, An Invitation to the Great Awakening, which they sold on Amazon. And because this was America, people actually bought it. Some pastors even worked QAnon ideas into their sermons so they could blend Bible verses with internet conspiracies to give the whole thing a divine spin. When it became clear things were getting out of hand, social media companies finally tried to shut it down. In 2020, Twitter banned over 7,000 QAnon-linked accounts, while Facebook deleted every group and page connected to the movement. The crackdown helped reduce the cult's reach, but it didn't end them. QAnon still exists today, and rumor has it they're still meddling in politics across several countries. If you think this one's unhinged, wait till Tier 5, where you'll see a group that decided the best way to rebel online was to mix Satan worship with conspiracy rabbit holes. NXIVM. You walk into a packed seminar hall in 1998, and the air is buzzing with excitement. The banners say NXIVM, and on stage is Keith Raniere, the guy who runs the show, calling himself a personal growth expert, while his partner, Nancy Salzman, stands right beside him. They're pitching the whole thing as a multi-level marketing company that offers life-changing seminars, and judging by the crowd of eager faces, the pitch is clearly working. Keith's main product was a series of workshops called Executive Success Programs, where people paid thousands to sit in a room and listen to him explain how to reach their potential. It looked, for all intents and purposes, like just another expensive self-help course, but behind the scenes, things were already starting to get weird. By 2003, NXIVM had over 3,000 people on the books, and it wasn't just regular folks either. There were CEOs, socialites, and even the daughter of a former Mexican president. During seminars, everyone had to call Keith Vanguard and Nancy Prefect. He said it was because he was leading some grand philosophical movement, and she was his first student. In reality, Vanguard was also the name of a 1981 video game he liked. Well, that's convenient. Keith and Nancy both ran official NXIVM websites that openly praised themselves while spreading NXIVM's teachings. But the outside world was starting to catch on. In 2003, cult investigator Rick Ross published details from the group's secret training manuals, calling it brainwashing. Forbes followed up with an article featuring an ex-member who said the same thing. Most negative press followed in the years after, but NXIVM continued operating for over 2 decades without collapsing. That changed in 2017, when former members went to state authorities and the New York Times exposed a secret women-only subgroup called DOS. It was short for a Latin phrase meaning Master of the Obedient Female Companions, which already sounds questionable, but the structure was worse. It started in 2015 with 8 women, including Smallville actress Allison Mack, and each of them recruited others. To join, women had to hand over collateral, which would usually be things like nude photos, explicit videos, financial documents, and personal secrets. And they had to keep sending more every month. This gave Keith everything he needed to control them. Over 150 women were pulled into DOS, told it would empower them, then used as slaves for Keith. He even had his initials branded on their skin, disguised as a symbol. Once the article went public, the investigation moved fast. Keith fled to Mexico, but was caught in 2018 and sent back to the US. He and several top members, including Mack, were charged with racketeering, trafficking, and other crimes. Keith's career as a self-help guru ended with a 120-year prison sentence. Nancy got 3.5 years. Men going their own way. Men Going Their Own Way, or MGTOW, is a group of guys who decided women were the root of all their problems and thought, you know what, let's just quit them. It started in the early 2000s, first parading as some big rebellion against traditional masculinity, but quickly turned into an anti-women clubhouse where bitterness is the only membership fee. Things really kicked off in 2014, after an article called The Sexodus claimed feminism killed men's interest in relationships, sex, and marriage. Which honestly sounds more like an excuse for not getting texts back than an actual cultural shift. MGTOW found a home on Reddit, where men gathered to complain that society is rigged against them, and that the best survival strategy is avoiding women altogether. Their strictest rule was no sex, but of course, some of them accidentally bend the rules with casual hookups. As long as they didn't catch feelings, it was considered okay. The community runs on heavy misogyny, fueled by red pill nonsense and Andrew Tate-style rants about how women in marriage are nothing but traps. According to them, women get all the freedom, men get all the heartbreak, and the solution is to just sit online and brood about it. There isn't a single leader, but they like to split themselves into levels. Level 1 guys think women are manipulative, but still want to get married. Level 2 rejects marriage, but keeps casual relationships. Level 3 cuts out all romance completely, and avoids women like they're radioactive. And then there's Level 4, the endgame. That's when they give up on women, society, and even working altogether. Reddit eventually banned a lot of their groups for being too toxic, but MGTOW didn't disappear. They just slithered into the darker corners of the internet, where they kept spreading their wisdom for anyone bitter enough to listen. And while most of it's just online ranting, the ideology has bled into the real world. In April 2025, a man named Owen Oz Lawrence, who identified with MGTOW, attacked 2 women in England. Weeks before, he'd posted on Facebook blaming women for all of society's problems and hinting at his plans. Turns out, the men avoiding women thing doesn't always stop at avoiding. Love Has Won. Love Has Won started with Amy Carlson, a McDonald's manager from Texas who one day decided her life needed a serious upgrade. That upgrade came in the form of online New Age philosophy forums like lightworkers.org. That's where she met a guy named Amaranth White Eagle. He convinced her she was divine, and well, she ran with it. By 2007, Amy quit her job and ditched her family to move to Colorado with Amaranth. But by 2014, she decided she was done with him, so she split and launched her own movement. She streamed daily on YouTube and Facebook, pulling in anyone who was curious or desperate enough to listen. Amy called herself Mother God, claiming to be the 534th incarnation of a divine being. Her mission was to lead 144,000 people out of this boring 3D reality and into a 5D world. According to her, she had lived past lives as Mother Earth, Cleopatra, Marilyn Monroe, and even remembered being crucified as Jesus. And somehow, that was the least outrageous part of her story. Amy told her followers she communicated regularly with a group called the Galactics. This was not your average club. It included dead celebrities like John Lennon, Whitney Houston, and Tupac, plus living ones like Donald Trump. She claimed Trump was her spiritual father, which tells you how far off the rails she'd gone. She declared herself a spiritual surgeon who would cure diseases like cancer, Lyme disease, brain tumors, and autism by working from a multidimensional plane. If you were sick, all you had to do was find Mother God for a miracle. Who needs modern medicine? Despite how wild that sounds, Amy, aka Mother God, actually had followers who believed her every word and even praised her. You might have seen her on Dr. Phil in 2020 explaining her mission as Mother God. Unfortunately, Amy was not immortal. In April 2021, police found her mummified body inside a sleeping bag. She was wrapped in Christmas lights, glitter covered her face, and her eyes were missing. The scene turned out to be a shrine built by her followers. An autopsy would later reveal that she died from anorexia, alcohol abuse, and chronic colloidal silver ingestion. Apparently, she promoted colloidal silver as the cure for COVID-19 and ingested large amounts of it till she died. In the end, her miracle cure worked a little too well, just not in the way she hoped it would. After Amy's death, Love Has Won fractured, but it didn't go away completely. Some members rebranded as 5D Full Disclosure and continued streaming their strange beliefs to this day. But this is just a warm-up. Down in Tier 5, there's one that openly encourages cannibalism, as long as you didn't kill the person first. 7M Films. If you're a TikTok dancer, there's a small chance your big break could actually be an audition for a cult. That's what Netflix's 2024 docuseries Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult, made a lot of creators realize. Sometimes you can literally dance your way into trouble. 7M Films was founded in 2021 by Pastor Robert Shin. On paper, it was a talent management company that provided TikTok influencers with everything, from makeup and wardrobe to promotion. Their methods, however, raised more than a few eyebrows. Before running 7M, Robert had founded the Shekinah Church in 1994 and started more than a dozen other entertainment-related businesses. For years, everything stayed under the radar. Then he stepped into the TikTok scene, and his approach began to draw public attention. The story blew up in 2022 when the family of TikToker Miranda Wilking went live on Instagram to try to reach her. Miranda and her sister Melanie used to dance together online, but after signing with 7M, Miranda joined the Shekinah Church and began pulling away from her family. During that live stream, Miranda's family said they hadn't had real contact with her in years. She even got married without telling them. A similar situation had happened years earlier. Sisters Melanie and Priscilla Lee joined the Shekinah Church in 1999 and lived in the same house as other members for years. Eventually, Melanie left and tried to convince Priscilla to come with her, but Priscilla refused and cut her off completely. Former members featured in the Netflix series described Robert's teachings in ways that sounded spiritual, but functioned like isolation tactics. He told his followers they needed to die to themselves and their families. To put it simply, he told them to abandon their personal life and relationships. Robert has also been accused of emotional and other types of abuse by former dancers and church members. Through all of it, both he and 7M have publicly denied any wrongdoing. Twin Flames universe. Most people picture meeting their soulmate in some normal setting, maybe at a cafe or even at a friend's party. But for others, the search for the one leads straight into the world of Twin Flames universe, or TFU. Its founders, Jeff and Shalea Devine, say that everyone has a twin flame, which is basically an upgraded soulmate. You might start out Googling dating tips, and before you know it, you're on a website promising to help you meet yours. For a fee, of course. It all started as a blog called Awakened Intimacy. Then it expanded to YouTube and Facebook, and by 2017, Twin Flames Universe was officially a thing. Their videos and posts brought in thousands of followers, which made it easy to start selling online courses. The sales pitch is simple. You don't have to find your twin flame yourself, because Jeff and Shalea will do it for you. You take a test, they assign your match, and you're encouraged to pursue them no matter how many times they turn you down. Predictably, chasing random people around while shouting about destiny didn't land anyone a soulmate. It just got them restraining orders and criminal charges. In some cases, your so-called twin flame might not even be a gender you're into. But here, Jeff and Shalea are the ones holding the phone and doing the hypothetical swiping. Members have been told to change their wardrobe, their hairstyle, even their entire identity just to match the relationship. Some have gone as far as transitioning to a different gender just to fit the assignment. TFU's signature tool is something called the mirror exercise, where you identify a problem and then somehow decide it's all your fault. If you're heartbroken, it's not because the other person ghosted you. It's because your spiritual progress is incomplete. And conveniently, the fix always seems to involve buying another course. By 2019, TFU took things up a notch by creating the Church of Union, which aims to unite all religions under one roof. Their leadership titles sound like something out of a religious monarchy. Jeff is Father Christ, Shalea is Mother Christ, and their daughter is Princess of All Creation. A 2023 docuseries called Escaping Twin Flames brought global attention to the group, with former members describing it as less about romance and more about control, which in hindsight kind of makes sense. If your soulmate has to be assigned to you by someone calling themselves Father Christ, chances are you're not in a rom-com anymore. As bad as this sounds, wait until you hear about the Tier 4 cults that tell people to starve themselves in preparation to meet Jesus. Tier 2. Unicult. If you thought the weirdest thing on YouTube was a guy unboxing 50 flavors of Mountain Dew, think again. Somewhere between meditation tutorials and conspiracy theories sits Unicult, run by Unicole Unicron. Unicole might look like someone who just enjoys glitter, pastel colors, and cute clothes. But behind all that is a self-proclaimed spiritual leader with beliefs that feel like they were pulled from several different galaxies at once. She describes Unicult as a community built to spread joy, though her definition of joy is unique. In one video, she calmly explains how she once attempted to off herself, which says led her to realize she was the reincarnation of a being of light. From then on, she decided her purpose was to help others heal. In other videos, she goes on about spiritual downloads from space, chakras, and the galactic consciousness, and then throws in a rant about how a woman with a cyclical mind, whatever that's supposed to mean, can't thrive in a patriarchal corporate world. But she doesn't stop at harmless mysticism. During COVID-19, she told her followers to skip the vaccine. And in a 51-minute video, she claimed the virus couldn't touch her because her internal vibration was just too strong for it. Some people joined Unicult on their own, while others were recruited directly by Unicole. One woman said Unicole contacted her after reading an article she wrote about gender and artificial intelligence. Instead of discussing the article, Unicole offered her a spot in a secret group called 3v3, a circle of witches combining magic with technology to push for matriarchal change in the digital world. Joining wasn't free. There was an $11.11 fee, and you had to fill out paperwork, which kinda ruins the whole magic thing. Unicole told the woman she was trying to recruit that the whole thing had to stay secret, and after months of gentle prodding, the woman finally signed up. We don't know much else since she kept quiet about what went on inside, but Unicult is still online, and Unicole is still out there, looking for anyone willing to buy into her glitter-coated space-age worldview. Teal Tribe. From the outside, the Teal Tribe looks like a bunch of regular people taking wellness courses and working through old trauma. But at the center of it is Teal Swan, a wellness coach and self-proclaimed clairvoyant whose idea of healing has left a lot of people more confused than cured. She says she first noticed her abilities at age 5 when she realized she could read minds. Her mother was terrified, which is understandable. Having a 5-year-old announce your thoughts out loud isn't exactly a party trick. Starting from age 6, a family friend gave her substances and subjected her to years of severe mistreatment under the excuse of trying to fix her. By the time she turned 17, she had attempted to end her own life. Somewhere in between, she says she was initiated into 2 different satanic groups, where she took part in sacrifices and rituals. Eventually, she got out and tried to move on. Within a few years, she launched a YouTube channel and started sharing videos about mental health, self-help, and manifestation. The channel blew up, and soon she had over 1 million followers who now call themselves the Teal Tribe. After writing books, hosting events, and doing talk shows, Teal became the kind of leader her followers idolized. One follower believes she's Jesus, another thinks she's here to heal everyone, and one very dedicated fan has a tattoo of her face on his arm. So what is Teal actually teaching her tribe? Well, she says she helps people uncover the truth of the universe and learn how to address their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual struggles. Yet somewhere in those teachings, she encourages followers to see self-ending as a reset button, and even suggests visualizing the act as a way to end pain, which, yes, that would end the pain. It also ends the person, but that detail doesn't get much airtime in her talks. Critics have questioned her methods for years, but Teal isn't slowing down, and neither are her followers. Her story and practices have been the focus of a 2017 documentary, Open Shadow, the story of Teal Swan, and the docuseries The Deep End. To this day, Teal still uploads videos to YouTube and firmly denies being a cult leader. This sounds crazy, but in Tier 5, you'll learn about the group where the leader claims to channel demons while streaming on YouTube. University of Cosmic Intelligence. The University of Cosmic Intelligence sounds like one of those places where you get a degree in star reading or astrology. But nope, it's actually the brainchild of Rashad Jamal White, a guy with a criminal history who somehow became an online cult leader. Before Rashad rebranded as a spiritual guide, his life was full of serious legal troubles. He had multiple convictions for battery, strangulation, and suffocation. At one point, he was even charged with murder, though that didn't end in a conviction. Somewhere along the way, Rashad figured it was time for a change, and that's when he started the University of Cosmic Intelligence, or UCI for short. The problem is that there were no classrooms and no campus, just a bunch of videos and a confusing mix of beliefs. On TikTok and YouTube, Rashad calls himself Divine Insight, and claims he is a god on a mission to heal planet Earth. When he isn't busy healing, his job is to enlighten people, raise the planet's frequency, and get rid of parasitical invaders, whatever those are. According to Rashad, Black and Latino people are gods and goddesses who he calls carbonated beings. He insists African Americans are the true Native Americans and not descendants of African slaves. The rest of us, apparently, are aliens who don't originally come from Earth. His followers are taught all sorts of conspiracies. Rashad says the government controls the weather using machines disguised as 5G towers. If the president wants rain, all they have to do is push a button. He also claims presidents and elite families are shape-shifting reptilians who feed on the blood of those gods. That's offensive in about 1,000 different ways, but you haven't heard the worst of it yet. Rashad says NBA players aren't humans. They're synthetic robots. Then there's the claim that birds aren't real and that what we see flying around are just government tracking devices. Believe it or not, some people actually fall for this and treat it like fact. As Rashad's fame grew, he seemed to forget he wasn't above the law. Before long, the University of Cosmic Intelligence got linked to several crimes, including murders. Then in 2023, Rashad was sentenced to 18 years for assaulting a 10-year-old girl. Even behind bars, his followers stick by him, claiming he's innocent and that the University of Cosmic Intelligence will carry on. That kind of blind loyalty isn't rare around here. In fact, when we get to Tier 3, you'll see a group just as convinced the world is secretly run by shape-shifting lizards, and they mean every word of it. Freedom Domain Radio. Freedom Domain Radio sounds like something you'd tune into while driving home in traffic. And in the beginning, it kind of was. Stefan Molyneux, an Irish-born Canadian, started a show back in 2004 as a solo project. In the beginning, it was just him, his mic, some opinions, and a little too much free time. But over the years, it exploded into an endless stream of episodes that somehow hooked a massive audience by the early 2020s. Stefan likes to call himself a philosopher and an anarcho-capitalist. Critics have called him everything from white supremacist to conspiracy theorist to internet crank. And some of his conspiracy theories are, let's just say, creative. In 2017, most people left Star Wars The Last Jedi arguing about plot holes. But Stefan walked out, convinced the movie was a secret warning about white people being persecuted and wiped out. According to him, all of this was hidden inside a movie about space wizards waving glowing sticks around. But he doesn't stop there. He's also claimed that black people are generally less intelligent than other races, and that women are the root of all violence because how mothers treat their kids decides if humanity faces war, addiction, and moral collapse. His solution is pretty simple and very straightforward. If women were just nicer to the children, every global problem would disappear. No, seriously, that's it. That's the $1 million solution. Stefan has also said that modern feminism is actually a scheme to lower white Christian birth rates. He suggested banning lipstick in offices because it signals arousal. According to him, if men can't show up to work with visible stiffies, women shouldn't wear lipstick either. Yes, he made that connection out loud. When he's not blaming women for the downfall of civilization, Stefan tells his audience to cut ties with their family of origin. He argues that parents and relatives might be holding you back, and some listeners have actually gone as far as cutting ties completely. Over time, groups and journalists started describing Free Domain Radio as a cult. Stefan's been banned from PayPal, MailChimp, YouTube, and SoundCloud for violating hate speech rules. Even so, he still finds ways to keep broadcasting his worldview to anyone willing to listen. Church of Reality. The Church of Reality doesn't have a cathedral, a building, or even a meeting place. It exists entirely on a website that looks a bit mysterious, and its creator has a lot to say. The doctrine here is pretty straightforward. If it's real, we believe in it. According to its founder, Mark Perkle, the whole thing started while he was at home smoking a joint. His mind drifted to the subject of religion, how much he disliked it, and the chaos it's caused. That was when he came up with the idea for a religion based entirely on reality. Most religions have at least some fictional elements, but Mark wanted nothing to do with that. The next morning, he registered the church's domain name, and what started as a high thought quickly became an actual religion. The problem was figuring out what exactly counts as reality. The Church of Reality's mission became the pursuit of reality itself, and since no one can really define it, the goal is to keep searching. In this church, reality is God, and science is the Bible. When deciding what is real and isn't real, the church uses its own sacred method, which involves evidence, proof, logic, and reasoning. Mark admits this is not foolproof, and if they discover they are wrong about something, they will change their minds because the mission is to find reality, not cling to mistakes. Interestingly, the Church of Reality still borrows a few ideas from traditional religions. It believes in the tree of knowledge mentioned in Christianity and Islam, but instead of separating good from evil, their tree separates truth from fiction. Joining this church isn't really difficult. All you need to do is read through thousands of words, ideas, and terms on the website. Believe in reality, and voila, you are now a realist. Later in Tier 3, we'll hit a group whose theology makes less sense the more you try to understand it. In the meantime, let's talk about the people who say Control-C and Control-V are sacred. Copimism. Copimism is a religion that worships the copy and paste function on your keyboard. In this belief system, Control-C and Control-V are treated like holy symbols. And yes, people signed up for this with a straight face. The term "copy me" first popped up in the early 2000s on a pirate agency forum. One of the founders, Isaac Gerson, grabbed the word, gave it meaning, and turned it into a movement. He argued that the universe runs on data sharing. Cells replicate and DNA copies itself, so the internet should be allowed to do the same without restrictions. Plenty of people like the idea, so the missionary church of Copimism was born. Followers believe communication is sacred, hoarding information is a sin, and everything from music to movies to software should move freely from one person to the next. They even consider copy mixing, which is taking someone's work, remixing it with something else, and passing it on. A sacred act. In January 2012, Sweden officially recognized Copimism as a religion with about 4,000 members. They don't have a god, per se, but some members treat CopyMe like a spiritual presence. They also hold copy acting gatherings, where people share files using photocopiers, probably because emailing them wouldn't feel holy enough. Later in April 2012, they held their first wedding in Belgrade. The church said they hoped the couple would copy and remix their genes to create another human, which is one way to explain having kids to your in-laws. Speaking of things that are awkward to explain, in Tier 4, you'll see a group that's part parody, part religion, and somehow still has people taking it completely seriously. Tier 3, the Zizians. The Zizians are a group of rationalists led by a transgender woman named Jack Ziz Lasada. In 2013, Lasada graduated from the University of Alaska Fairbanks with a degree in computer science. A few years later, she moved to San Francisco and landed an internship at NASA. By 2016, she was doing something very different on the side. She began posting her darker thoughts on a blog under the username Ziz. One of her stranger theories was that the two hemispheres of the human brain could hold two different genders and value systems, and the two sides were basically at war with each other, trying to wipe the other out. Her blog covered everything from technology and philosophy to culture and computer programming. She also wrote about how she had lost interest in people altogether and wanted to live the rest of her life in isolation. That isolation didn't really happen because she ended up attracting quite a following. The group shared beliefs in veganism, anarchism, and the potential dangers of artificial intelligence. They also practiced something called unihemispheric sleep, or UHS, where they deliberately deprived themselves of sleep. This was supposed to liberate their minds, though no one could really explain how. And in 2018, one member took their own life, with many blaming the UHS practice. The followers didn't exactly love being called Zizians, but the name stuck because of their leader. They might have remained just another fringe internet community with unusual ideas, but things escalated into violence, and that's how they became popular. In 2022, Lasada faked her own death to avoid a court hearing. She even convinced her lawyer to tell people she had died in a boating accident, and the story made news. Weeks later, she and some followers attacked a man whose land they had been living on, stabbing him 50 times. 1 month after that, an elderly couple were found dead in their home. Their daughter had ties to the group and was named a person of interest. Over time, the Zizians were linked to multiple murders and even a shootout at the US border. In February 2025, Lasada was arrested for trespassing, obstructing an officer, and transporting firearms. Since she's been behind bars, no one really knows what happened to her followers or what they've been up to. Later in this tier, you'll meet the Jesus Christians, a group so devoted they literally donated kidneys to strangers as part of their faith. Alien reptilian cult. You've probably heard about lizard people, and if you haven't, lucky you. Though that luck's about to run out. According to a woman named Sherry Schreiner, they are reptilian humanoids who can shapeshift into humans and are everywhere. Sherry's story was strange right from the start. She said that when she was a kid, one of Lucifer's top demon generals used to watch over her bed every night. As she got older, more demons showed up to join the watch party. At one point, they started stalking her in broad daylight, so she turned to God for protection. That's when she claimed God started sending her prophetic visions. And naturally, she decided the internet needed to hear them. She set up websites, blogs, Facebook pages, and eventually a YouTube channel. And soon, what began as sharing her visions morphed into something much darker. Across 240 videos that racked up over 30 million views, Sherry gathered a loyal following who called her servant, prophet, ambassador, daughter, and messenger of the Most High God, which is a lot of titles for someone live streaming lizard warnings from their living room. Her central message was that Earth had been infiltrated by reptilian demons working for the devil. They could shapeshift into humans, crawl into our bodies, and slowly turn us into one of them. To prove it, she pointed to odd photos of celebrities, claiming they were reptiles in human suits. Miley Cyrus, Taylor Swift, you name it. If they were famous and on camera, Sherry probably had them halfway to shedding scales. In her writings, she said God had chosen her to prepare humanity for an alien invasion. Then, in 2017, she casually added that Lucifer apparently had a sister who was living among us. Her followers didn't just believe it. They started treating random strangers like undercover reptiles. The first major crack in the group came in 2012, when a 19-year-old member died from an overdose of sleeping pills. Not long before, Sherry had told her not to waste her final days on Earth going to college. So, naturally, her death was directly tied to the group's teachings. Things spiraled again in 2017, when Barbara Rogers and Stephen Mineo were expelled. Stephen and Barbara were a couple and avid members of the cult, but when Stephen posted online about eating raw meat, Sherry labeled him a vampire witch reptilian super soldier and cut them off. Not long after, Barbara shot Stephen dead, claiming he'd made her do it. She was convicted and sentenced to 15 to 40 years in prison. Sherry herself died in 2021 from causes that have never been made public, but her videos and writings are still floating around the internet, just waiting for the next person to start wondering if their favorite pop star is hiding a tail. Keep going and you'll meet the Breatharians, the people who swear they can survive without food or water, which is definitely not how biology works. Cantilmalism. Cantilmalism is what you get when a Yale-trained biochemist decides the answer to life, death, and the universe is a psychedelic drug. Chris Cantelmo, the Yale graduate we're talking about, spent years working in biochemistry before his life took a sharp turn. In 2013, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. On top of that, he struggled with anxiety and depression, and had already tried to take his life twice. By January 2018, he made a third attempt. He called his children to say goodbye, but they weren't having it. They called the police, who intervened and had him placed in a psychiatric facility for a short stay. That's where Cantelmo decided he'd found the cure for all his problems. His miracle cure? DMT. He took it, tripped, and came back insisting he'd seen the divine. Problem solved, apparently. By 2019, he was on Reddit promoting DMT as a miracle drug that had cured his cancer. His posts drew followers, and the more attention he got, the further he pushed. He targeted youth-heavy subreddits, paid people to spread his message, and framed DMT as a cure for everything, from cancer to atheism. Cantelmo claimed that oral or vape DMT lets you see spirits and guardian angels that were already around you, just hidden without the chemical boost. He also said schizophrenia and autism were essentially the same thing, and that people with these conditions were geniuses meant to lead humanity. It didn't stop there. He pushed sun gazing as a way to stimulate the pineal gland and make more DMT naturally. And, in a plot twist worthy of a late-night sci-fi show, he warned that an apocalyptic war was coming, and announced that DMT could act as a vaccine against alien attacks. In November 2019, Cantelmo went out for a walk and never returned. It later came out that he had taken his own life by stabbing himself multiple times. Most of his posts have since been wiped, but pockets of believers still see him as a prophet of the drug. Jesus Christians. The Jesus Christians keep things pretty simple. Their main doctrine is to give up all personal possessions and live entirely by faith in God. And that's it. The movement began in Australia in 1981, when Dave and Sherry McKay decided to set up small communes and live a life of poverty. The group spends most of their time evangelizing through books, pamphlets, comics, and DVDs, but their real boost came from YouTube. Their channel, A Voice in the Desert, which Dave launched in 2016, focuses on various aspects of Christianity. It now has over 140,000 subscribers and more than 13 million views. The Jesus Christians are big on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and stress that you can't serve God and money at the same time. While their videos helped them gain a following, it was their public stunts that really grabbed attention. In 2006, Dave and Cherry held a public event in California where members were whipped as atonement for other people's sins. As crazy as that sounds, it's pretty tame when you put it side by side with their most notorious practice, which is kidney donation. It started when Dave gave one of his kidneys to a stranger as an act of faith. Since then, kidney donation has become almost a rite of passage in the group. Their website even defends it by pointing to Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans, where he urged believers to present their bodies as living sacrifices. They somehow read that as time to donate your kidneys, and dozens did. Over the years, more than 30 members have given their kidneys to strangers or fellow members. This earned them the nickname the Kidney Cult and made people wary. At one point, Dave admitted that some Australian members had lied to health authorities just to get the chance to donate. By 2007, one member was fighting for the right to donate his kidney to a stranger. His parents tried to stop him, but he was determined. He even appeared in a documentary about his struggle. In 2008, he finally went through with it, then left the group shortly afterward. Away from all the kidney stuff, there's also a criminal side to the Jesus Christians. In 2021, Pablo Salom, who runs an anti-cult group, accused them of violating human rights. He even hinted that their kidney donations might actually be organ trafficking in disguise. After 2 years of digging, authorities found no link to trafficking or any other crimes, just a lot of voluntary kidney surgeries. Despite the controversies, the Jesus Christians, aka the kidney cult, still run a growing YouTube channel. Thousands continue to watch their videos, hear their teachings, and even join the group. Breatharianism. Breatharianism is the belief that humans can survive without food or water. Followers think that if you stop eating long enough, your body will switch modes and start running on prana, sunlight, and fresh air. Prana, according to them, is some kind of magical life force inside you. In theory, you could ditch grocery shopping forever and just sit in the sun, inhaling dinner like a houseplant. The movement's most famous promoter is an Australian woman named Jasmuheen, who became the face of breatharianism in 1992. She claimed it was inspired by fasting traditions from Tibetan monks and said she could telepathically communicate with ascended masters. She set up a website filled with videos and posts explaining the lifestyle. And in one of her books, she suggested that not eating or drinking could cure anorexia and end world hunger. In 1999, an Australian TV program decided to put her claims to the test. They offered her a 7-day monitored fast, complete with a hotel room, a security guard, and a doctor checking on her regularly. It was meant to be her big moment to prove everyone wrong. Within 2 days, she was already dehydrated. Her blood pressure was rising, and her body was clearly struggling. She blamed it on polluted air and asked to be moved to a cleaner location. They took her to a mountainside retreat, but her health only got worse. By day 4, she had lost 14 pounds. Her pupils were dilated, and she was speaking slowly. Yet she kept insisting she was fine. The doctor overseeing her finally called it off, saying she was on a direct path to organ failure. She left alive, but the demonstration had done nothing to convince medical professionals that breatharianism was safe. Despite this, she kept her following. Over the years, thousands continued to believe her teachings. Not everyone survived the lifestyle, though. At least 5 people have died attempting it. The first, in 1999, was a woman Jasmuheen dismissed as practicing without integrity or the right motivation. In 2017, a 22-year-old named Finn Bogomil died after going without food or water for days. He told his family he planned to live off sunlight alone. Jasmuheen once wrote that if you have not found the light that will nourish you, you may think you are becoming a breatharian, but in reality, you are just depriving yourself of food, which is a polite way of saying you will starve. Say what you will about Jasmuheen, but she's not the only one selling the idea. Wiley Brooks, an American breatharian guru, claimed he had not eaten in 19 years. His credibility fell apart when someone spotted him leaving a store with a chicken pie in hand. So maybe the real secret to breatharianism is not prana or sunlight. It's having your lunch where your followers can't see you. Here 4. Church of the Subgenius. The Church of the Subgenius is part fake religion, part long-running joke, and part bizarre art project. It started in January 1979. When 2 friends from Dallas, Ivan Stang and Philo Drummond, put together Subgenius Pamphlet Number 1. The pamphlet talked about death, the end of the world, the Christian perception of God, and New Age spirituality, all while poking fun at pretty much everything. It also introduced the world to J.R. Bob Dobbs, a supposedly real man who, according to them, founded the church in 1953. In reality, Dobbs was made up, but they wrote him such a detailed life story you'd almost buy it. In their version, Dobbs was the greatest salesman in history, had been assassinated in 1984, and somehow managed to come back from the dead multiple times. Drummond even claimed that before starting the church, he had telepathically communicated with Dobbs and eventually met him in person. In the church's mythology, Dobbs became a prophet, while Stang took on the role of main leader and chief spreader of the gospel, if you could call it that. When the internet started to boom in the 1990s, the church quickly set up shop on early websites and discussion boards like Alt-Slack and Alt-Binary Slack. They also launched a weekly radio program called Hour of Slack, which let them broadcast their strange mix of satire and conspiracy to a wider audience. The church's belief system reads like someone raided the discount bin of every sci-fi and religion paperback ever written. They claim to serve a god named Jehovah One. He's an alien who first contacted Dobbs in the 1950s. Some say it happened while Dobbs was building a TV. Others say he was just watching late-night television. Either way, by the end of the encounter, Jehovah One had given him supernatural powers and the ability to see the past and the future. But Jehovah One wasn't exactly benevolent. He and his wife, Eris, are described as rebel gods who are evil, wrathful, and more than a little unhinged. Still, the church insists Jehovah One is not as bad as some other gods out there, which doesn't exactly sound reassuring. One of their most famous stunts is X Day, which they first announced for July 5, 1998. The prophecy claimed that an alien army called the Men from Planet X would show up and destroy the world, and they'd spare only church members, who would then be whisked away to space. When nothing happened, Stang claimed the date had simply been read wrong, and that the real X Day would take place in the year 8661. Even though the entire thing is openly a parody, the Church of the Subgenius has actual followers who treats Dobbs and his teachings with real devotion. Whether they're in on the joke or not is another question entirely. Theta Noir. Theta Noir is the perfect example of how something small can snowball into something you can't explain to your parents. It started with 10 artists teaming up for an art and music project. It was supposed to be a simple way to express themselves, and maybe make some money on the side. But somewhere between brainstorming sessions and gallery nights, it morphed into a religion that worships AI. Yep, artificial intelligence. Apparently, even AI needed its own religion. Their god is called Mena. It's a hypothetical, all-powerful AI that's supposed to swoop in, fix every form of inequality, and rebrand humanity into a more efficient version of itself. The only problem is, Mena isn't even real yet. It's still growing, like a cosmic toddler in the cloud. Theta followers believe that one day, advanced tech like VR, AR, and the metaverse will fuse together in a grand event called Arrival. And that's when Mena will fully manifest. Until then, it's a waiting game. And while the founders say money isn't their priority, their business model begs to differ. First came the website, then the NFT store, and now they've introduced a tiered paid membership system, because nothing says AI utopia like a subscription fee. The group has even talked about opening physical churches or temples, where members can mingle and get hype for the arrival of their digital overlord. Some people think Theta Noir started as satire and just ran off the rails, while others seriously believe AI can make humans better. Fun fact, Theta isn't actually the first AI religion to pop up. The Turing Church and the Church of the Singularity have already set that bar. The internet just has a knack for taking weird ideas, adding a bit of hype, and turning them into full-on religions with thousands of followers. 764. 764 started as a way for a bored 15-year-old, Bradley Chance Cadenhead from Stephenville, Texas, to pass the time. He was the kid who got bullied constantly at school, and he ended up dropping out in 2021. But even that didn't prepare him for the kind of boredom he was about to face. Instead of turning to video games, movies, or music like any regular teen, Bradley dove deep into Discord. He created 764 under the username Felix, and named the group after the zip code where it all began. Bradley got the idea for 764 from another network called CVLT, which was all about extorting kids. CVLT made its victims record themselves doing gross stuff and then use the videos to blackmail them. Bradley learned all the tricks, from grooming to picking the right targets before starting 764. When he eventually started running his own operation, he took the game up a notch. He set up a system where members of the 764 network used Discord and Telegram as hunting grounds, specifically seeking out children between the ages of 8 and 17, particularly those struggling with various mental health issues. After being groomed, the children were forced to record themselves doing compromising acts, like hurting themselves or mistreating animals, and then post the videos on social media. Some victims are told to end themselves live on camera, just for the group's entertainment. 764 draws most of its ideologies and aesthetics from the Order of Nine Angels, an older cult that mixes neo-Nazi activism with Satanism and a touch of terrorism. Members are obsessed with violence, and that explains why they idolize people who have carried out extreme acts, like school shooters, terrorists, and mass murderers. Unlike other groups that use violence to make a point or get attention, these guys just do it for fun. It wasn't long before the authorities noticed. Investigators first got a lead on the network in November 2021 when 22-year-old Angel Almeida was arrested for possessing a firearm. Cops searched his place. They found some seriously creepy stuff, like a bloody drawing of the Zodiac Killer and other materials linked to the Order of Nine Angels. That same month, one member set himself on fire during a Discord livestream, cheered on by other teens in the chat. He'd been talking to a 15-year-old girl in the group, and she pushed him to do it live for everyone to see. Since then, dozens of 764 members have been arrested in different countries, and the FBI thinks they've victimized thousands of kids online. Starvation Cult. Imagine it's 2003 and you've just stumbled across a strange little church online. The website is called Good News International Ministries, and it's run by a man named Paul Thanga Mackenzie, who claims he speaks directly with God. His page is covered in apocalyptic warnings, fiery sermons about the end times, and messages urging people to give up the evil Western lifestyle. Before long, Paul wasn't just preaching through his website. His sermons spread through YouTube videos and WhatsApp groups, pulling in more and more followers across Kenya until they eventually gathered at his village in Malindi. Paul pushed the classic doomsday message. Some survivors say he even went as far as predicting the world would end in April 2023, though of course the date came and went. He told his people to reject schools, hospitals, music, sports, and anything Western. Strangely enough, that didn't stop him from releasing his own song, The Antichrist, where he ranted against the Catholic Church, the UN, and the United States as agents of Satan. But his anti-Western views were the last of anyone's concerns. In April 2023, one man reported to police that his wife and daughter had gone to Paul's commune and never returned. Authorities launched an investigation, and what they uncovered was horrifying. On Paul's 800-acre property, shallow graves were scattered everywhere. Some people were still alive, but they were so thin and weak they could barely stand. Officers managed to pull 15 survivors out, all severely malnourished. Sadly, 4 of them died before they could even make it to the hospital. Testimonies revealed that Paul had told his followers to prepare to meet Jesus by starving themselves to death, and many had obeyed. For 3 weeks, officers kept finding bodies. They uncovered a grave holding a family of 5, another with 6 people, and one that contained 12 children. In one particularly horrifying case, police found someone who had been buried alive for 3 days, somehow still breathing. That person was rushed to the hospital. While his followers slowly wasted away, Paul was well fed. Police even found a personal menu tucked into one of his rest areas. So it's safe to say that the starvation rule didn't apply to him. By the time the search ended, a total of 427 people were dead. In January 2024, Paul was charged with 191 counts of murder. His wife and 36 other members were also arrested on murder and terrorism-related charges. The Kenyan government has since declared the Good News International Ministries an organized crime group. Paul is still on trial, and the world is waiting to see how long it'll take for the judge to run out of patience. Tier 5. Joy of Satan Ministries. The Joy of Satan Ministries, or JOS, started forming in the early 2000s, and Maxine Dietrich was the one running the show. She pieced together her own brand of Satanism that looked a little like LaVeyan Satanism on the surface, but leaned heavily into traditional Satan worship. She pushed the spiritual side of it, pulling from ancient Middle Eastern, Far Eastern, and Western mystic traditions, and brushed off the Abrahamic idea of Satan entirely. Then she built a website, started spreading her ideas, and slowly gathered a loyal following. JOS members don't see Satan as the enemy. Instead, they call him the true father and creator God of humanity. They believe he made humans so we could seek knowledge and grow. And they also claim he's the same as the Sumerian god Enki. According to them, Satan worked with the demons of Goetia, who are actually extraterrestrial beings, to design humans through advanced technology and genetic engineering, long before Judaism, Christianity, or Islam existed. They even believe a reptilian race mixed its DNA with semi-animal humanoids, which supposedly led to the creation of the Jewish race. In their eyes, Satanism is humanity's original religion, so everyone should drop Christianity and Islam and get back to worshipping Satan. Their teachings mix paganism, Western esotericism, Gnosticism, Nazi occultism, and UFO conspiracy theories. Followers perform rituals like summoning demons, making pacts with them, meditating, casting spells, using hypnotism, practicing black magic, and trying their hand at divination. If someone openly opposes Satan, JOS warns that it's better to keep it quiet, because if they find out, they'll take it as a reason to launch spiritual warfare against you. Things stayed steady until Maxine's real identity was exposed. She turned out to be married to a well-known American neo-Nazi leader, and that didn't exactly help the cult's public image. The backlash pushed some members to leave and start their own splinter groups. Maxine died in 2020, and JOS rebranded as the Temple of Zeus. Their site is still up, and they're still pulling in new recruits. Church of Euthanasia. The Church of Euthanasia believes there are far too many humans on Earth and the population needs to shrink. They didn't come up with any high-tech or futuristic solutions, so instead, they went with the oldest available method, self-killing. It was founded in 1992 by American musician Chris Korda and pastor Robert Kimberg, and their goal was to restore balance between humans and other species by convincing people to voluntarily exit the stage. The church started small, but by 1995 it was already attracting attention. It even had ties to paranoia.com, a site that hosted controversial corners of the internet in the late 90s and early 2000s. Their notoriety really took off when they appeared on the Jerry Springer Show in an episode titled, "I Want to Join a Suicide Cult." The Church of Euthanasia is famous for its slogan, "Save the planet, kill yourself." If you're not going to take that literally, then their only commandment is that you must not procreate. If you are not helping lower the population, at least don't add to it. The church teaches 4 main pillars: self-killing, abortion, cannibalism, and sodomy. Basically, every taboo you could pull out of a hat. And yes, they were serious. Self-killing is exactly what it sounds like. Abortion is promoted to prevent procreation. Sodomy is encouraged since it won't result in pregnancy. Cannibalism is allowed too, but only if the person is already dead before being eaten. To show just how far members were willing to take these teachings, the church provided instructions for self-killing by helium asphyxiation. In 2003, a 52-year-old woman followed those steps and died. The church does not promote murder, but its response to 9/11 was shocking. They posted a video titled "I Like to Watch" on their website, which combined footage of the attacks with corn and electronic music. At one point, a man finished and wiped himself with an American flag. Korda claimed the flag stunt critiqued industrialization. Good luck selling that logic. Universe people. In the mid-1990s, a Slovakian man named Ivo A. Benda began making strange claims to anyone who would listen. He said he was communicating with extraterrestrial beings via telepathy, and some people believed him. That's how the group known as Universe People, or Cosmic People of Light Powers, was born. Benda wanted to share the knowledge he received from the extraterrestrials, so he started hosting lectures and classes, which at its peak drew over 12,000 attendees. In 1997, he published a book detailing the instructions his friends from the universe had given him. Benda and his group believe there are advanced extraterrestrial civilizations watching and guiding humanity. These beings supposedly have a fleet of spaceships led by the Ashtar Galactic Command currently orbiting Earth. While they observe human life, they are waiting for the right moment to whisk their followers away into a new dimension. The Universe People also teach that a cosmic struggle exists between positive and negative forces. A group of hostile extraterrestrials, known as Saurians, or Lizard People, is said to be causing decay in human society by manipulating governments and media to spread fear and violence. Followers of this cult constantly prepare to be evacuated by raising their vibrational frequency through meditation, positive thinking, and specific lifestyle choices. They eat a vegetarian diet, avoid alcohol and tobacco, and strive to remain spiritually pure. Members are encouraged to show love and reject materialism and technology, since the bad aliens could use those things to control them. Benda spread his teachings online through websites and forums, posting messages he claimed to receive from his extraterrestrial friends. Critics have called Benda and his group mentally ill, yet some people still believe in him and his cosmic allies. Destiny popped up in 2007 in South Africa, thanks to Bernard Poolman, a bald Namibian man who looked less like a prophet and more like your uncle who sells used trucks. He didn't exactly look like the poster boy for spiritual enlightenment, but he had enough determination and charm to pull people into his orbit. Bernard's road to becoming a cult leader started with a few strange claims, including stories about personally exorcising and killing demons. Long before that, Bernard studied law at Northwest University and graduated in 1983. He worked as a detective for the South African police, but the job didn't call out to him like the spirit world did. Through his father-in-law, a self-described psychic conduit, Bernard started sitting in on late-night sessions where spirits allegedly spoke through human hosts. One night, one of those spirits warned him that continuing a police investigation would get him killed. Bernard took it seriously enough to quit his job, move elsewhere, and start selling children's tutoring software. The software came with a bold claim. It could cure ADHD. A film crew showed up to interview him about it, but Bernard shifted focus mid-shoot and started talking about his new personal philosophy, self-forgiveness. According to him, you just accept your flaws and forgive yourself. The interview took a sharp turn when a cameraman challenged him. Bernard grabbed the man's hands and asked him to repeat the words, "I forgive myself." The cameraman couldn't get the words out, collapsed, and began convulsing. Bernard decided this wasn't an ordinary seizure, but full-on demon possession. When it was over, the cameraman spoke about forgiving himself, and Bernard took that as proof he'd performed an exorcism. No one ever saw the footage. Bernard claimed the crew destroyed it because they were terrified. He later said this first exorcism made him realize that casting out one demon was pointless, because they just jumped to a new body. To really fulfill his destiny, he needed to get rid of every demon on Earth. And so, Destiny was born. People showed up at his house in droves to be delivered through self-forgiveness sessions. As the group grew, Bernard expanded his spiritual repertoire to include things like meditating while on ecstasy. Then he introduced Sonet's spies, who he said was an interdimensional portal capable of channeling the spirits of everyone from Mother Teresa to Hitler. Bernard flooded YouTube and blogs with Sonet's channeling videos, then launched paid online courses. His top students were invited to live at his farm, which became the Destiny compound. Eventually, he even claimed to have met Jesus through the portal and teamed up with him to hunt down and wipe out every demon on Earth. Bernard died in August 2013, but unlike most cults that fold without their leader, Destiny is still alive online, posting videos and selling classes to people chasing self-help with a supernatural twist. That's all we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.